1,000 years ago, people believed in the magic sky daddy. The economy was shit, everyone was racist, and women were locked in the kitchen. It was the age where the white man ruled.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Longhouse with a brand new intro for covering what you've decided to call Longhouse Kids Plus. Now, the Longhouse is obviously a show about art, culture, politics, philosophy, etc., all with a true right Nordic perspective. And today we are diving into our first version of Longhouse Kids Plus, where we're going to be looking at pieces of art and content that might have shaped some of our childhoods, specifically considering today's topic, as we'll be covering Gargoyles, a mid-90s cartoon that Luddic Path you watched growing up. I didn't, so I've had to return to it at an adult age.
Yeah, to clarify with you, actually, I didn't watch that much of it growing up. I caught a few episodes, but recently I sat with my wife and tried to watch through the entire 78 episodes of it. And I figured if I put so much time into it, I'm gonna have to, I better do the episode now while it's like fresh in memory, because I did put out we did put out a poll, right?
Yeah, and you're the one who came to me with the idea of talking about this. So
yes. I like certain topics that I feel, are kind of a little bit underrated by some of these other content creators in this sphere. So there's a lot of history buffs and people with other types of expertise, but I don't see anybody really doing this stuff. So I imagine that there's a pretty big audience for like this particular thing discussed in a way that's
retrospectives content.
Yes. I mean, it's funny, but you can't underestimate programming for kids, right? It's an important thing, and you need to. I wanted to sort of look at what kids are watching. What were they watching in the past? What are they watching now? And look at some of the political implications, some of the ideological implications, and broader learning that happens in these shows, and see what we can take from that.
Sure. It's something, if you're in the process of de-boomerizing yourself, knowing how you got there is also part of the process. And I think these shows are a part of that. Now, I was a bit confused watching. I watched, for the record, one season of the show. You watched everything. But I was a bit unsure what you were looking for when you came to me with this as I watched it, because with the mind I have now, I'm sort of always ready to point out the subversions, and I wanted to see if there was anything anything based at all in this, but you had a bit of a different perspective.
Yeah, no, my perspective, of course, I do think there's certain base things in this show, maybe not in a way that's going to make every viewer watch all 78 episodes of the show. I mean, it's not like some kind of secret Soviet hardcore reactionary show that I found in a basement somewhere. But I feel like this show is a very nice time capsule into a different version of the future, basically. I watch Dave the Distribute It quite a lot, and he spends a lot of time describing what it was like to be a sort of young progressive in the 90s living in California, and having this really nostalgic grand vision of a future where there would be a sort of integration of all the worldviews into this big Faustian thing that was going to burst into the future with both the technology and things that felt like actual progress, not the stuff that we have now, where it's really just degeneration that's just painted over with a paintbrush and cold progress, and things generally suck. But I feel like this show actually, like a lot of these Fresh Prince shows, it had a lot of artistic vision, and it had the will to integrate many different worldviews into a greater dialectic. It had the will to humanize a lot of people with different worldviews than what would have been the what's kind of like what the woke heterodoxy that we're living in now, or
Right.
what would be heterodoxy? What would it be like the woke hegemony, I guess?
Hegemony, yeah, that's the word
Because
you're looking for.
that is, watching media now. It's the solution to the progressive, all of
There's
the
one message.
all of the issues in the progressive dialectic is really just okay, there's one truth, there's one right way to view this, and if you don't look at it that way, you're basically scum, right? You're not even human, you don't deserve human rights, and you're just supposed to repeat this idea and not think about anything else. But you can see in this show that the approach is very different, and they have a very kind of high IQ way to try to integrate a lot of small truths into a bigger picture, even though the problem with this worldview was always that these truths were small truths. They weren't, really complete worldviews, complete understandings of how these worldviews interact, whether it would be traditional religion, modern Western liberalism, and so on. It is a kind of incomplete worldview that's very eclectic, but you can see in shows like this that there's some optimism in where we would go, and that's kind of why I wanted to take a look at it.
Create a lot of characters that represent part of these worldviews, and then they sort of pit them against each other and see if they can make them come to an understanding, it seems.
Yes, and in that way, the characters are quite well fleshed out. They're they spend a lot of time explaining the backstories of their motivations and why they do what they do, and try to resolve the conflict in a way where it's beneficial for both parties. And it's not just like, okay, we're the good guys, these are the evil guys. The good guys are going to beat the evil. The Power Rangers formula, in a sense. It's kind of like an anti-Power Rangers
the real question
show.
Is the Power Rangers formula more based, technically? Is the Conan the Barbarian way to go?
Yeah, it might be more based in some sense. Maybe if you're on the right side of it, but. Again, this is something I have from Dave the Distributist. He says that like the Power Rangers show really is like the dominant worldview of the the media product for the progressive, right?
Yes,
it is like you every day it's a new enemy that you have to fight, and you always win, but the threat is always real, right? You've never taken an L. You've never taken an L ever, but you keep they keep just spawning these new monsters that you have to fight and defeat.
Yeah, the Hydra just keeps spawning heads.
Certainly. And of course, this is not, it's not just coincidence that we bring up Power Rangers, because at the time that this show was running, Power Rangers was running concurrently. And part of the reason why this show was, it went off the air, is that Power Rangers outperformed it. So, you can already see there kind of part of the logic, part of the foreboding of where we were going in the future with the just the TV ratings of what was popular and what wasn't.
Welcome everyone in chat as well. Just want to acknowledge you guys before we get into some of the stuff. Did we bring any news today that we wanted to cover? I've been too busy fighting, taking pot shots at Americans to gather any news articles.
I've also been following the American saga, but it seems like there's very few interesting news bits.
Nothing's really happening. Yeah.
You posted something on Twitter with that they had American soldiers during like a Norwegian press conference. That was quite interesting. Yeah. It's a short article if it's the one from Steigan.no.
It is. I can bring it up because I basically tweeted a Google Translate from this. Hang on a moment. Sorry, I don't know. Still a little bit sick from last week, so I'll have to mute sometimes if I have to cough.
You have to cough. So I hope you're masked. I hope you're masked and sanitized.
Oh yeah, I'm double masked, so that I don't get any germs on my microphone.
The droplets, they pass through the electrical wires.
In the chat here. Now the spell is broken and we live again. Yes.
So, the nostalgia will help, right? I think there's a lot of even if like the narrative underneath this show is not based in the sense that we like, it still has the aesthetic, I think, of what is sort of gothic, old, medieval based aesthetic that is respected.
Certainly. Let me see if I can get the translator on this. It does not want to. How do I? There we go. Okay. So, present screen. So this is a very short, basically a comment on Steigan.no, which we covered way back on the Longhouse. You can go back and watch that if you want context for what paper this is, or blog, I should say. And it's called "What Would Per Borten Have Done?" Now, this man was the prime minister in the 60s. And the article tells the story about how Norway in 1968, he writes, in 1968, 2 American CIA agents stormed into the office of Prime Minister Per Borten without an appointment. They asked the Prime Minister to remove himself. They were supposed to do a security check at the office because Vice President Hubert Humphrey was visiting Norway. It was the Norwegian Security Service that had approved this operation, where, incidentally, the Prime Minister refused to move. So he refused to evacuate his office because, a foreign nation demanded it. Fast forward to Norway in 2022, there's an article from some other journalist in which she writes, "When I arrived at the Prime Minister's office for the Wednesday's press conference, a couple of American soldiers in uniform were standing in the same room. They had no role in this session, but they were nevertheless a reminder of the seriousness." And the writer here goes on to write, "American soldiers in uniform inside the Prime Minister's office during a press conference. No Norwegian journalists who followed the press conference were surprised by the political implications of this. In June, the Storting agreed to 4 American military bases on Norwegian soil, but that is not enough. Now the Prime Minister's office is also under American supervision." And I would like to ask some of the Americans, not all of them, but considering how much I enjoy being under you guys, and it's just, I'm asking for it. How do I vote myself out of this? Please respond in the comments below.
Please respond. Yes. No, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know exactly what the rationale behind this is. If they're worried about some kind of Norwegian Rousseau subversion. I mean,
I don't understand.
The Norwegian politicians have been like sucking Zelensky off harder than I think most countries. So I don't know what they're worried about.
Even that being said, I mean, historically, there's no love for Russians in Norway. It's this weird either or. You can say that the realpolitik might play out that, if we're not with the Americans, we're with the Russians. But I'm I'm not very inclined to see that Russia is able to take on the entirety of Europe.
Yeah, based on what we have seen, I strongly doubt that. So, but I mean, it'll be interesting to see. Were there any pictures of this conference? I would like to see the.
There was none I could find. No.
I will have to.
Maybe there are some out there, but I wasn't. I just followed up on the article he linked, but I couldn't find any. So, I don't think we have anything else that's worth. It's been a very slow week. It's the Nord Stream thing is still going on, and considering how much everyone is talking about how serious this is, and no one's pointing any fingers, the Americans probably did it. Because if it was the Russians, everyone would be saying it, right?
Yeah, I mean, the longer it goes on, the less I think it makes sense for the Russians to have done something like this. So, but right. I don't know what are the consequences going to be, right? I mean, I believe it happened in American-controlled territory, so it's nothing's going to be done.
Maybe they'll soldiers at our press conferences and military bases on our soil. So, I mean, I don't have a voice in this apparently.
Nope. This is for the big boys. Right?
It's for the big boys.
You can vote on something else, right? I don't exactly know what. I don't know what we get to vote on.
The rate of trans pipelines or something. Yeah. Let's see here. Okay, I think we'll just bring up the
jump right into the presentation.
Yeah. Because everything else I had potentially collected is so boring. Compared to triggering or trying to trigger Americans, so some interesting news. The politician we covered, Bent Høie, that was like the Norwegian COVID czar. It's now divorced from his husband of 21 years. So that's true. That's modern conservatism.
That's a big L for modern conservatism. room. Let's just say that the
One of your strongest homosexual soldiers.
strongest homosexual soldiers. I have no words.
One
Speechless.
F in the chat. All right, let's go.
Yeah, I think we can just jump right into the presentation.
So
yeah, big
this is one
spoiler
of
alert.
those. This is one of those things where I'm not necessarily well versed in what we're getting into, because this has been your your idea and your show. As you said, you watched the most of it, so you're going to have to lead on here as we go through the characters and the themes. But before we do, I'll just like to remind everyone that in the description down below, there's the link to my Twitter, where you can get all of my base takes all the time. You can join the Longhouse Element Shieldings channel, which is basically Discord, but it's encrypted. There's also a link to the Longhouse clips if you enjoy watching parts of the show or feel like you don't have the time to watch all of it. Luddic Path is nice enough to sort of segment some of our episodes into longer and shorter clips. And finally, there's the subscribe star if you would like to permanently support the show. Did I forget anything? Is there anything else?
No, I think you got everything.
All right, I'm trying to get
Nice and
better at
covered.
chilling.
Chilling is out of the way now.
Yeah.
I mean, the show runs for a lot of episodes, and it's a big lore in this show. A lot of twists. I don't know. You watched the first season. I assume there was a lot of twists already in the first season, but they keep just like twisting the plot, and there's always new revelations about things that happened in the past. New elements get introduced that you didn't expect.
Yes.
So
I was also surprised at my memory of a lot of these shows is that characters are very much one-dimensional in the way that I'm the good guy and I always do good guy things, but the characters are much more consistent with their actual values or willing to bend to fit the situation, I guess.
Yeah, but I think that's very much unique for this show, or maybe the show's creator, or you could say sort of producer and writer Greg Weisman. I'll say a little bit more about him, later. But just so everybody is warned, if you want to go and watch 78 episodes, you can do that now. But I assume that everybody is big boys in the show. So, and as far as I understand, people are actually more likely to want to watch these shows after it's been spoiled. I don't think it actually has any impact on the watchability of a show, or whether people will actually watch it, unless somebody's just like you're in the show right now, like you're currently at episode 30.
There's going to be some spoilers about like specific episodes where like a thing happens, I guess, but in general it's more like a character deep dive, I guess.
Yep. I mean, there are a lot of retrospectives on the show on YouTube already that cover a lot of the technical stuff in great detail, and you have the typical kind of nerd retrospective where it's all about like the behind the scenes stuff. So we'll talk about the voice actors. Oh, did you know this guy also played this guy, and they played together in this other film, and they played the same kind of coupling, or you have the good cop and the bad cop, and they also played good cop and bad cop.
I'll try to
80s, right?
I'll try to supply some of that on some of the Star Trek people, but my knowledge is limited.
Well, are you a Star Trek fan?
The Next Generation fan, yes.
Oh, that's good.
I'm well served in this show.
Oh, nice. Well, yeah. I mean, contribute to it everything you can, by all means. But I mean, what I wanted to do here is just provide a bit of a cultural commentary on what's going on in this show, and like my view on the show as kind of a whole product and the significance it had in culture, not really in terms of how it impacted people, but how I feel like it reflects that period back at us right now. And if I spend way too much,
in the pre-show, we called it a time capsule.
Yes, and I mean, if I spend too much time just going into technical details, I feel like it breaks down a lot of those points. Those types of like Morgoth, like cultural points are a bit broken down if you get way too involved into the nitty-gritty historical reasons for why every single
That's the way
decision was made.
we should do things, and we do things usually here on the quote unquote dissident right. You don't give people a breakdown of Julius Evola. You give him like a paragraph, and then when he says, "What the hell is this?" you tell him to go read Revolt or something.
Perfect.
You give him the instinct and the feeling of something, and then tell him to go do his own research.
Yes. So, I mean, of course, I'm going to do a lot of the work for you here, but we can keep jumping in the slides. So I'll keep explaining as we go along. So we're not starting with Gargoyles, actually. We're going to start with Disney Afternoon, which is something that of course, I just said I was not going to go into the sort of nitty-gritty about history, behind the scenes stuff, but we have to do a little bit, right? Disney in the 70s and 80s, I don't know if you have like a good timeline of what movies came out when, and if you're sort of like a Disney appreciator, but it had a bit of a rough spot, a bit of a dry spell in a sense, for a certain number of decades before the 90s. And if you were young in the 90s, you got to...
Those Disney products I was exposed to were usually the classics, the classic animations. I'm not talking Steamboat Willie, but I'm talking the refreshments of the the Cinderellas and the classic stories, right?
Yes. Snow White, I think, would have been
Snow White. Yes,
one of them. Cinderella was
Cinderella.
all
of them, basically. All of those from that era.
Yes, but I mean, they had a bit of when you watch stuff like Oliver and the Gang from the 80s. It's like it's okay. It's like serviceable, or the Cauldron, but it's not great. It's lacking a little bit. It's I wouldn't say mediocre, but it's it's not on par with the stuff that you end up getting in the 90s, where they have like
that's true
complete. I mean, they call it the Disney Renaissance.
Yeah, and I was pretty much squarely into that. Right when I finished with a lot of the British stuff, I was huge on Winnie the Pooh and Thomas the Tank Engine and that stuff. A lot of the British kids media made its way into our household.
Yeah, interesting. But with Disney Afternoon, this was they got in a new CEO that's named Michael Eisner, right? And he had it was a big ideas guy, and he had a lot of ideas in terms of how to make Disney more profitable. And one of those ideas was to have, after school cartoons programming. And from what I understand, like the back office nature of this is that they sold, the rights to run certain shows between, say, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. And basically bundling them into like this, let's say like the cartoon hour, or a certain 2-hour segment where you would just run some of the shows that are put on the bulletin board here, like Goof Troop or Darkwing Duck, the DuckTales. And I think, with the Gummy Bears and DuckTales, they were not made specifically for the Disney Afternoon. They were older shows. Like Gummy Bears goes back to the 80s.
I didn't have a lot of Disney Afternoon, really, like after school stuff. For me, it was...
you didn't have this in Norway, right? But in Sweden, you had something called Disney Ducks, which is something I tuned into. I tuned into Swedish television to watch this.
Okay.
So, I mean, with this, it would have been a lot of kids' introduction to some of these more classic, like Disney characters, whether it would be Donald Duck or like the Jungle Book, where they had the tailspin.
Mm-hmm.
I remember like enjoying all of these shows, but still not remembering a lot of particulars of what actually happened in them. I don't know if you have a similar feeling. I think in Norway, a lot of these shows would air on, probably not Fox Kids, but if you had like TV3 or TV2 or something, some of these private privately
TV2
run
only,
channels.
because that's the one I had, which pretty much did like old Bonanza reruns and MacGyver shows. So that's what I grew up on. I have the same effect, but just for MacGyver.
Yeah, I think MacGyver was the big one for
an old like Knight Rider and stuff like that.
Yes, like that was the millennial show. If you go back, go home after school and watch MacGyver. But I mean, Disney's plan here, and this has been, it was run in Sweden. It's been run multiple places in Europe and so on. And of course, there's no like strict rules about how you do this. You could arrange the shows in the way that you wanted and buy as many episodes as you liked and so on.
Yeah.
So this had been a success, and then the question was, okay, what do you do to diversify in a sense? And in the 90s, that didn't mean we just add fat black women into the shows. It means that you actually try to do something different, right? The 90s was actually better in that sense. Like diversify actually means that you get something that's a little bit different.
The hope meter was on top for the future in the 90s, so people thought we were actually all going to get along.
Yes, and that's where you get like one of the producers that worked on Disney Afternoon and worked on some of these shows. Greg Weisman, as I mentioned, he had like this pet project that was called Gargoyles. And in the beginning, it was just like a slightly softer, more, was supposed to be a bit more of a comedic show with a lot of the same characters and the same locations. But I think because of the success of Batman the Animated Series in 1992, they decided that they could revamp it a little bit to be darker, because you saw that in the 90s, this whole movement of like making comics edgier, like you had the evil Superman and Spawn and Doomsday. You've probably seen a lot of these covers where they have like the guns and a
lot more gritty shows.
The work in the front, party in the back, haircuts and scars on their face, bodybuilding physiques, laser eyes, and so on. It's a little bit cringy, but like it was a big growing appetite for that, like this kind of more adult-ish kind of cartoon entertainment.
And I suppose it probably coincided with a lot of the kids watching the other stuff, getting older and wanting things more their age, right?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a new thing with the kind of the post-war development, is that you have kids who just grew up on television and they get older and they want more edgy stuff, and that's where some of this comes in. At least that's what I assume.
Then if you're lucky, they'll buy Funko Pops when they're 25. So yes. I mean, then you got them for life.
Well, you certainly do. It is very sinister that way. I don't want to blackpill me too much about the consumer life cycles of Disney and so on. We'll just
the water we all swim in, isn't that the phrase? Yeah.
Just breathe through the nose and think back to the 90s. Think happy thoughts. But as you can see, like the common denominator between all of these shows is that they're sort of revamps of like these older Disney characters put in more modern settings, but they're still very much rooted in classical Disney intellectual property. And with Gargoyles coming up, that would not be the case at all. It's like it's a completely new universe that has no connection or reference to anything Disney. As far as I'm concerned, the only reference to anything Disney related Gargoyles has is really like the Beauty and the Beast motive. And the Beauty and the Beast had come out in like 1991. I think that's one of the most popular 90s Disney.
I think it borrows some of the aesthetics from it, but that's probably it. Like,
well,
you get the feeling that some of the people that worked on that movie maybe worked on this one as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, they, when you have these two main characters, there's like the Goliath, that's a big gargoyle, and the sort of Hispanic Native American love interest that are, at least in terms of physiognomy and the kind of archetype is there, even though relationship is a bit different in terms of like there's not this kind of it's not really like this one vulnerable, like these two vulnerable people who try to resolve their problems. Like this is one thing that I like about Gargoyles as a show, is that it seems like some of the main characters are very much mentally competent, which is not something that is typical.
It's
like when I watch,
you have like 7 neurodivergent teens trying to have sex with each other. That's TV these days, I feel.
yes, exactly. I mean, but even in cartoons, right? You tend to have a lot of these characters who either would be anti-heroes or they'll have some type of like mental illness or some something like superpower, but they also have a mental illness and they still are able to solve all of these problems in spite of being like barely functional at any level.
Yeah, and you see that in Goliath a lot, actually. You see him being sort of the leader of the clan, I guess is the word. I mean, the premise of the show, just to get that out of the way, maybe.
Well, we'll just flip the slide here, and we'll get.
Okay, before we do that, hang on a moment here. I see Jay Burden in the chat, and if I remember correctly, next week we are doing King of the Hill, continuing this streak, and he's going to come on as a guest to talk about or to reminisce about that show.
I tell you what, boy.
Yeah, I tell you what.
Coming,
I
tell you what.
Do I look like I know what a JPEG is? Yeah, and all that. We're gonna. I sell propane and propane accessories. Yeah,
I like this new generation of music.
I'm gonna get all the memes out of the way. Yeah. So yeah, tune in for that next week. Is my point. Okay.
Early reveal, unless people get too bored of this show. So
yeah,
I mean, yeah, this is like the only human face you're probably going to see in this presentation. It's the face of Greg Weisman in the middle there. That is, he is really like the brain behind this entire show. And like I said, you don't expect anything sort of Evolian capital T tradition here. He is a part of the tribe, like pretty much every person who worked for Disney in the 90s, and probably every person who works for Disney now. Within like these sort of the people who actually make decisions about what's being done there or not. So we're not getting away from that. I'm sorry, but they exist on a scale, right? There's some who are like really subversive, and other ones of them who are more interested in trying to explore stuff.
I'm sure his position as a producer was earned totally fairly without any nepotism at all.
Well, yeah, even that has to be on a scale, right? I think that
that's what I'm saying.
Even among
he
the
might
people
be
that,
he might be a normal person, but the reason he's in that position might just be a bit of emergent behavior.
Of course, I mean there are usually probably 1,000 people who have similar ideas to him. But in a sense, I think he is a shot, slightly taller and a little bit above the rest in terms of his creative output. Like he's worked on other shows as well. Like I think the Spectacular Spider-Man he did later, Young Justice. He's done a lot of these superhero shows.
Is that the Spider-Man show that I remember where like Peter Parker is like super jacked?
I don't think so. It's not the 90s.
Is that the
show.
Amazing Spider-Man?
Yeah, no, I think it's just called Spider-Man. The 90s show where everybody's jacked. But I think generally the quality that he has in terms of making like cape shit stuff is really above a lot of other people. And there's stuff that he's invented and created that we'll get into later that's being used by other script writers and so on. So. And he seems to be like less interested in just pushing political narratives rather than creating stories that are more intricate. But of course, the question here on the slide is like, what is a gargoyle? And I mean, to be fair, when I saw the first episode of this show, I've not seen a gargoyle in real life. I think my first exposure to a gargoyle was through other Disney films, like say The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I think that's the first time I saw like what a gargoyle could look like.
I don't have the timeline correct if it was Hunchback of Notre Dame or if it was like in an actual church, but it must have been around the same time. But yeah, I can understand what you're saying.
So I mean, I it's easy to kind of scoff at the idea of trying to explain what a gargoyle is to the people who are watching the stream, but then I remembered that of course I had not seen one in real life until I was an adult. And I can't take that for granted. I mean, how many gargoyles exist in Norway? I don't think we have a single one actually that I can think of. So you'd have to be, perhaps in France or certain, parts of the old countries to see them. And I mean, most of the time they just exist as like this type of to just carry water off the buildings. So they just like squirt, the water just pours out of their mouth in a sense. Like you'd have a gutter, basically an extension of the gutter that just has a kind of a decorated stone statue that just pours water down. Of course, others have made them more as statues that just supposed to stand and decorate the walls, like the one that's pinned on the billboard. So, of course, now that you know what they are, we can sort of explain like the premise of this show is that we now live in like this alternate universe where gargoyles are like a biological being that exists, and how they function is that during the day they're basically stone statues, and during the night they're able to break out of these stone statues like you see in the intro. They make like a big screamy scene, and they're basically alive then for I think 10-12 hours until the sun comes back up again, where they have to return to their sort of stone state. And this is something that makes them vulnerable. So in this show, the way they survive is by engaging, like getting into pacts with human beings, where they will live on castles, protect the castle during the night, be stone during the day, and then just have the mutual benefit of have the human beings protect them when they're vulnerable as stone creatures.
And them protecting the humans at nighttime.
Yes. And I mean, that's something that's used to great effect in the show. Not only, the fact that they're asleep during the day, it allows most of the action to happen at night. So then you get this kind of like neo-noir type style aesthetic, like you see in the picture in the bottom right there, where it's always nighttime, like a detective story, or like it's Batman, basically. So, I mean, we're coming back to Batman. These creatures are basically like the Batman made into like a biological creature. It's difficult to kind of explain.
I mean, they can't even fly.
Way.
Technically, they can pretty much just glide. Is like
a
of
course
point.
They're quite like liberal about gliding in the show, how it actually works. It's basically they can fly, but they need to be at an elevated point to start flying. So that's how they traverse the world, is that they will either fly or they can crawl up the walls because of their super strength and claws. So they can crawl up rocks and so on.
Now, the basic... Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, they have like human level intelligence, and they're not immortal either. They actually do die of old age, even though they last longer than human beings. But like
I think the story, I feel the show is a bit fast and loose on sort of what levels of damage they can take, because at some point they're like they can almost get shot at without taking any damage, and then once the plot bullet hits, that's damaging, right?
Yes. But they are more robust than regular human beings. Yes. But it's seemingly quite easy to kill them as stone, and this is another thing that the stone mechanic allows in this show, is that you can have people or characters killed, right? They're put into stone, and then you're smashing a stone statue. I mean, you're actually killing someone, but in terms of when you're dealing with censorship and censorship bodies, it's a little bit easier to get away with. I mean, I'm just showing the kids someone smashing a stone statue. I'm not actually showing
someone stabbing someone, or actual
somebody
death.
bleeding, even though the show does go in that direction as well. Like they don't they take it as far as censors allow in the 90s. And like, as a bit of a throwback to like Longhouse 2, where we discussed a lot of transhumanist topics, I did a rant on the movie Existence by David Cronenberg, where I made the comment that in the 90s, it was quite usual to use a lot of these abnormal mechanics to avoid censorship. Like you have these kind of sci-fi transhuman plots where you will insert, new body parts and new orifices and things into people, and people will do stuff with these orifices, and like the censors are not going to know exactly how to classify it, because it's not something that really exists in the world, even though I think from the perspective of the mammalian brain, this is clearly something sexual or something
sexual, like deeply, or violent, or
deeply violent. And in one sense, I can say that I'm not particularly happy about them being subversive with the censorship codes. But on the other hand, you can see that the censorship code enforces creativity into these products, because when you have more liberal censorship like we have now, like if you're watching episodes of something like Black Mirror as an example, where they'll just show straight up sex, right? It's just straight up pornographic sex, or Game of Thrones, and
there's not even any layering, right?
No, there's no layering, there's no creativity in it. We'll just show porn, like, and that's how I feel about a lot of these.
That's entertaining, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, but I mean, people want to. You can make sure that people are watching, right? If you have.
That's what I mean. Showing people here's porn, and someone gets stabbed while he's having sex. Continue to the next episode, right?
But it's lazy, right? It's extremely kind of lazy in a way that, okay, we just need to get more viewership. We'll just put in more, more pornography and more stabbings. So in the 90s, you had to be a little bit more creative, and that led to people exploring stuff like sci-fi and magic, and this show does both. I mean, in this universe, you have both magic and science fiction basically cooperating, and that's what I talked about, like with the the 90s liberalism and the complete synthesis of every viewpoint, where we're like both Evola and Isaac Asimov have like a get together moment, and sort of we combine we combine the ideas into something new. Even though like the idea that you can combine ideas like that, it's based on a flawed, very eclectic understanding of what they actually are, but that flaw, that fallacy, enables something else. And that's what I kind of like about the 90s, is that there was a lot of fallacies going on in terms of how things were going to work out with multiculturalism and so on. But in some sense,
There was an earnestness in trying to work through it, right? And trying to create something greater out of it.
Yes, I'm going back to the language of George Soros that we talked about in the Open Society episodes. He uses the term a fertile fallacy, right? In the sense that maybe you're mistaken about certain hard realities of the world, but that fallacy enables you to create something that could become a new reality. In a sense,
yeah, you can use it to slingshot yourself even to even greater heights, right?
Yes, and I mean Soros basically says that he thinks the Enlightenment is a fertile fallacy, even though like the idea that human beings are rational, self-guiding individuals, it's not entirely true. It allowed for new political systems that launched us forward, in a sense. That's
a very progressive view of things.
Well, it is, but in some sense, I think there's a kind of point there. You can say that it launches us backward, but there are stuff that came out of the Enlightenment in the sense that. I mean, we can sit and trash progress all we want, but there has been stuff that's happened, technologically in like the last, 100 years that has been quite, quite impressive, right? It's so you can't. I'm not going to just slam.
No, you have to take the good with the bad, right? So
everything is bad. I'm not a third worldist, right? But okay, I'm just getting way off topic here. So to explain gargoyles as a sort of concept, we have then a castle, as you see in the bottom left there, that is in Scotland in the year 997, which is not historically accurate from what I can see. The first castle in Scotland was raised in, I think, in 1100 something, right? So that didn't really exist. But like with this Greg Weisman guy, he wants to kind of explore. He wants a little bit of everything, right? And it's not going to be satisfying to like these hardcore history buffs. But
he uses a lot of that stuff pretty much as like a vessel for like surface level Shakespeareanism, I feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the Shakespeareanism is also surface level, right? So instead of having like references to other Disney stuff, he actually puts a lot of Shakespeare in here, even though I think like his understanding of that is quite surface level, which is okay because my understanding of Shakespeare is surface level as well. So I mean, this is a thing that I thought about this show. If I had more time, maybe I would like try to read up more on Shakespeare. But I think I might be wasting my time because it's I don't think he really goes into
the wizard character in the castle timeline feels like a Shakespeare character without any Shakespeare lines, if that makes sense, because he speaks very different from everyone else.
The Shakespearean drama is quite heavy.
And the tragedy of him sort of, dooming his friends, and then because he believes that is he like technically like secretly in love with the princess or something?
I don't remember like all of the details of that.
His tragic story is pretty much that the princess. He thinks the princess is killed, and he blames the gargoyles, so he turns them into stone. But then he finds out she isn't dead, but he can't undo the spell, so he's pretty much doomed his friends.
Yeah, that's a Romeo and Juliet type.
Exactly right.
Type twist to it. I mean, of course, that storyline goes way further as well, where it's like, okay, they weren't dead, but they were dead somewhere else, and they bring in all kinds of mythologies as well. Like if you were like a kid in the 90s, this show would have been a great way to learn about mythologies, even though it's represented like completely wrong in terms of the source material. You'd figure out that okay, Odin is something that exists, right? The Banshee is something that exists. Certain like African mythologies are brought up here that I don't remember. Like in particular, they have a part in the second season that's like this really globe-trotting, more padded part of the show where they just go travel to like every country and interact with some mythological creature.
Can I play the Norway segment?
Well, yeah, actually you can, because they have an episode where they go to Norway, where they meet Norwegians who have a completely normal Norwegian conversation. So you can play that for the kicks.
Today was your best game yet, Gunther. You were the star of your team.
Well, you're a great teacher, Papa. What was that?
I'm Erik Sturluson. This is my son, Gunther. Our farm is just up the road. You're an American.
Papa? Her story doesn't make sense. If Elisa was out hiking when the storm came up, why wasn't she wearing a parka?
Do not pry, son. When she wants to tell us what really happened, she will.
It's Gunnar Sturluson and his son Gunther. Now that I'm listening to it, someone in the chat, please go check. Has that guy voiced in Skyrim?
It would have been funny. Yeah, this is what I imagine. Like every time academic agent tries to watch this show, that this is what we sound like. Yeah.
Inga Durgan, yeah.
Herga right, Lutefisk. But to kind of explain the a bit more of the Shakespearean plot, the original gargoyles that live in this castle in the bottom left there, that are like this the Viren clan. That's apparently a place in Scotland. They live there as protectors of this castle, and you kind of see how they work is that they protect the castle at night against Viking raiders and other people who try to invade. And they're being treated quite poorly. And this is sort of a theme in the show, that everybody hates these gargoyles, and it's sort of very ramped up in the third season, where it's one of these things that are, I think is a little bit subversive, because it's never actually explained. They spend so much time fleshing out a lot of other stories, but they never actually explain why people don't like gargoyles. I mean, they don't even invoke any religious reason. That's something that could have done, is that to say that, this is a heresy or something, or like this is kind of having these gargoyles is sacrilege.
I get the sense that the captain guy likes them, but he, well, spoiler alert, I guess, ends up betraying them for some other practical reason, right? His hand is forced.
Yes. I mean, so but most people, I guess, through most of history in this show, just hate gargoyles. That's just kind of the default state. But the gargoyles themselves are very much, both because of their vulnerability, they have to stay where they are, and they have like their own culture and their own tradition that is explained in the show. That they're very much sort of honor bound and duty bound to always protect the castle that they live in. So even if they're being treated as shit by the human beings, they have to stay there, because that's like it's their way of life in a sense. They have a lot of other traditions as well, like they don't use names for anything, or they have monogamous relationships, but they share kids in a sense. So monogamous couples will produce eggs that are put into a rookery, and when the eggs hatch, they will all have to just like shared ownership of the garglings, if you will. So, but what happens here is that, of course, one of the I guess he's sort of a taskmaster or something, who or a general who is like a contact, who's like the main kind of contact person for the gargoyles and the interfacing between the gargoyles.
He's the captain,
the royalty,
of the forces or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds correct. And he is unhappy. That's at least on the surface what you see. Is he's very kind of heartbroken about how badly they're being treated, and it goes to the point where he sort of feels like these human beings are so rotten that it would be justified for them to be overthrown in a sense. So he allows for he allows basically the kind of Viking band led by Håkon the Viking to raid the castle. And of course, the agreement is supposed to entail that he would leave the gargoyles alone, but of course he chooses not to do this because he knows the gargoyles are dangerous. So he ends up just like smashing the majority of these gargoyles. And there's of course this large complicated plot about who done it, who did this, and who did that in the end. But the final result of this is that there's a certain handful of gargoyles that were away when this raid happened, who were not smashed, and they returned to the castle. And they're so, basically, this includes the leader of the gargoyles, Goliath, and they're so kind of heartbroken about what's happened that they basically ask to just be permanently frozen in stone. So the
elf wizard guy freezes some of them because he blames them, and then the remaining guys, or Goliath specifically, is like, well, I'm gonna, you got to do it to me too, because I don't want to live without my pals.
He's a bro at the end, right? So,
and because he believes his wife is dead, he has a fantastic Phantom of the Opera moment where he says something like, "Oh no, my midnight angel," and then he does the like as the castle crumbles around him.
Well, you get to put a lot of this drama in there, and it's played completely sincerely in the show. And I mean, if there's if you ask me like, what do I see in this show, is that they're able to play these things completely sincerely.
And the Gargoyles get away with being sort of like hyper dramatic, because it's almost like that's their character, right? It's their species act like that.
Yes, and they come from a different time as well.
So that
So,
too, yeah.
but this is what happens then. Is that of course they stay, frozen in stone, but there's a sort of caveat to the spell that if they've been put into stone for over 1,000 years and then they're elevated above a certain point and they're elevated above the clouds, then the spell will be broken, right? And they come back to life. And so that's what happens, is that you have like this eccentric billionaire character, David Xanatos, that just, he travels to this castle and he finds these gargoyles, and apparently he's read somewhere that they're actually like living beings. So he just pays to have the entire castle kind of like moved with helicopters to his skyscraper in Manhattan.
Top of his skyscraper.
Yeah. But I mean, this is a kind of cool, when I talked about like this sort of 90s synthesis of the new and the old things, is that you have like a Manhattan skyscraper and then you put like a medieval castle on top of it, like you see in the bottom right corner. And that stuff at night. So when that happens, they of course break free and they have to try to accustom themselves to the new world and figure out how they're going to deal with their own situation, what they're going to do with their traditions, if there are any other living gargoyles and so on. So there's some, a lot of the plot, I guess, in the first season is revolved around them figuring out how things work in the future and trying to accustom themselves to basically, the 90s New York, which of course I've understood that New York has always been kind of shit, but I assume that it was also less shit in the 90s, right?
Yeah, there's some hints towards that in terms of the culture, I guess. But what I was gonna say regarding, like, this is probably like 15 minutes ago, regarding the fact that these characters are quite smart. I mean, you have these people like Goliath, who are then placed into a future 1,000 years into the future, and he's still able to pick up and carry conversations based on context clues. People will say something to him and he'll be like, "What's that?" And they're like, well, it's a thing that you can track something with it. Oh, some kind of spell? Yeah, I guess. Okay. And then he uses that concept further in his thinking without being hung up on what is the thing.
Yes, I mean, it's a very nice attention to detail, because the tempting thing to do would just be to pretend that they just know everything, right? If you're like a lazy screenwriter for a cartoon.
Spend a lot of screen time having them like trying to figure out modern New York, which they do as jokes for the kids at times, by them being fascinated by the TV and stuff, but they're able to pick up on sort of the uses of the tools quite quickly.
Yes, and of course you have like these other...
A lot of smart people would be able to, once you get over the initial overwhelming, of course, concept.
Yes, I think so too. Especially like with people from the past who were smart. If they were put in a situation and they have to adapt, I think they would adapt quite readily. There's no, certain people could of course get completely hung up on
people today use
details
phones without understanding how they work. So
yes, it's not that hard to. I mean, there's been similar concepts. It's like I hold this rock or whatever, and it comes a voice out of it, and I just talk back into it. It's not. The actual interfacing between these tools are very simple, even though the technology behind it are just way beyond what most people understand. And it's dependent on like this highly specialized, global network of people who each know small bits of how it works. But it's it doesn't say anything about the quality of the regular human being, which I think is actually quite a bit lower than it would have been in the year 997. But we could start flipping the slides here and look at some of these characters, because I think that's sort of a nice way to talk a little bit more about the show. So I had fun with the bulletin board here and tried to put more things on that I could go off. Let's see here. So here we have Goliath. That's the main character of the show. He's in the intro. He's the character screaming. It gets most of the screen time. He is what you call like the alpha male of this Gargoyle clan. And I mean, you talk about what I saw in the show. I think like this is one of the things that are not subversive. It's very clear that he is the society they live in is hierarchical, and that they have like these alpha characters who are on top of the hierarchy for a reason. It's not something that they've that like you have in some Disney films where you have like these bumbling idiot people who are on top of either businesses or kingdoms. Like I think about Aladdin, for instance, like the king in Aladdin, who's like this little midget guy who's a complete bumbling idiot. You have a lot of those characters that it's kind of meant to appeal to kids, where kids think that their parents are stupid or something. But with this guy, it's very clear that he has superior physiognomy to the other. He's like sort of Conan the Barbarian, imagined as a type of gargoyle character, but he's also quite intelligent and able to adapt. So,
Yes.
I mean, this is the sort of thing that, okay, what do I see in the show? Let's say they actually will try to subtly influence people of the value of reading, right? You'll see that the characters who are movers and shakers, like who are powerful in the show, spend time reading books, and the characters who are like lower
knowledge,
lower underlings are watching television. And this is it's not something that they're stating explicitly, but it's something that you see constantly, that when this character is not when he's not out fighting people, he is in a library like by himself, just sitting and reading. Whereas a lot of these like lower level gargoyles, the first thing that they do when they've sort of made themselves accustomed to life in 1997 New York is to start watching television, right? And a lot of the season 1 plots that come from that is basically them watching television, trying to emulate stuff. That's where you get the
then getting into trouble. Yeah.
Yes, the episode with the gun. That's
the gun.
That's one of the most where you have the one of these underling lower ranking gargoyles who's called Broadway, right? Because they don't have names, but when they move into the future, they have to have names to interface with people. So they end up just naming themselves, and they just take the names of street signs and monuments in
Hudson,
in New York. Yes,
the old guy.
So they basically pick their own names. The reason that Goliath has his name is that he was just given that name because he was like the representative of the Gargoyle clan 1,000 years ago, and that seemed like to be the most sensible name for him. But like the episode with this Broadway character, who's like a bit more of this fat, bumbling idiot gargoyle, is that he starts watching television and going to cinema, and he's watching like Clint Eastwood films and so on.
It feels like they wanted an excuse to animate Western, because they spend way too much time in that episode animating an entire like Western showdown as he's watching it on TV.
Yes, and I mean, I think he's watching it on TV. He's watching it in the cinema. He's fascinated by the gun. He tries to just do a lot of finger gunning around the place, and then he goes to visit the character that's in the bottom picture here, like the female character, and she's a police officer, right? So she has like a gun in her jacket, and he just pulls out the gun and starts firing it around the apartment, and he like shoots her in the back.
He accidentally shoots her in the stomach or something. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
And she has to go to the hospital, and
he almost
told
dies.
That she may not survive that. And it's a pretty sort of heavy thing to put in a kids cartoon. And this could have been, completely botched. It could have been turned into some like anti-gun type sentiment, but it's not, right? It's more of like this general cautionary tale about gun safety, and it doesn't try to moralize too much.
Exactly. Glow in the Dark says, for $10, thank you so much. Conan the Barbarian was originally smart because he had to fight dragons and wizards. He couldn't just muscle a dinosaur or a bunch of fireballs, so he had to go get some intelligence to win. That's correct.
You can only get so far with strength, right? I mean, you see that with a lot of these animals that were, like we talked about, like the big game that were hunted by human beings. They only got so far with size.
Exactly. And before I forget, he's voiced as well by the booming voice of Keith David, as it says in the Chad Goliath meme here. Who I'll provide some of the nerdery here. I think is the voice of the Arbiter from Halo, and Commander Anderson or something from Mass Effect.
Yeah, he was in Mass Effect. I mean,
So
he has a lot
if you've
of.
heard him before, this is probably one. He's been in a lot of stuff, of course, but
I absolutely guarantee that you've heard him somewhere. Like it's the likelihood if you've been kind of a millennial or a zoomer and you play video games and you watch Western media that you've not heard this guy's voice at some point is quite unlikely. He also voiced other like cartoons at the same time, like Spawn and similar things. I think the interesting thing is that like this is as white as he's ever sounded, right? Because he has to lean so heavily into this Shakespearean, Shakespearean angle.
He holds back his jive.
Yeah, there's very little Africanisms and very little kind of shadiness because he usually plays a lot more of these villain characters. I think most recently you have the Disney film The Frog Princess, where he plays the Dr. Facilieri. That's the villain character there with the song like The Friends on the Other Side. I mean, with that character, and usually the way they do these characters is that they'll have some general description. Okay, this is going to be a muscular gargoyle who will be like maybe 80 years old, 100 years old, and so on. And based on the voice actor they get, they end up changing the backstory and a bit of the facial features and so on. And they did this in the show with most of the characters, but not so much with this character. He is not really, in any sense that I can see, made to look like Keith David's, unlike the other characters that we get into. And as you see, like with the upper picture here, there are a lot of episodes with body transformations in the show where there's this kind of spell that's cast that's turning gargoyles into human beings, and he is basically imagined as this kind of like olive-skinned white man. So at least that's kind of how he's pictured in the show. I mean, I've seen, it's coming to me now with Keith Davis, is that he's been used in a lot of John Carpenter's movies. Is that something you're into?
Oh yeah. Let me see if I can pull up.
So he's like the black guy in They Live, right?
Yeah.
When they're having a fight, Roddy Piper, like, oh, put on the glasses. I'm not putting on the fucking glasses in there. Like that's him, and he's in The Thing. They use him in a lot of these Carpenter movies. I think that's something that we should look into on another show. Actually, I really like John Carpenter. I think there's a lot there. I think my favorite Keith David's role is actually Requiem for a Dream. That's like one of my favorite movies, even though it's quite difficult to watch. No, it's a Darren Aronofsky film, right? It's the movie about drug addicts, basically. Right. And how they end up. And in that movie, he just plays like this kind of sleazy businessman who just pays one of these drug addicted women to do let's just say some sexual stuff for money. But he just plays it so excellently that's it's very convincing. I think that's one of the few movies, Requiem for a Dream, where like Jared Leto actually has a good role. I think that's one of his most famous role, where he just plays like this junkie. Let's see.
Do we have anything more on Goliath?
Yeah, I had some other points here that I actually thought like why I like this character so much. I mean, if you look at cartoons, particularly for that era, I think that this is the closest that you get to a kind of reactionary hero. And like you talked about, what do I see in the show? Because in the 90s, it would have been so easy to make this character into one of these typical stereotypes that you see. You could have made him into an anti-hero, right? This kind of like hard drinking, Wolverine, kind of antisocial, unnecessarily violent character with bad mental health. You could have made him snarky, right? He would have been like this kind of eye-rolling character who were constantly ironic, breaking the fourth wall and so on. Or you could have made him into like more of this bumbling idiot kind of comedic foil character where other people just have to come and clean up after him. And they, all of that's avoided. All of these really annoying kind of traps, in my view, have been avoided with this character. And they just made him into like this kind of Chad, smart, strong hero who was taken from 1,000 years ago, put into the future, and tries to basically, in the face of all the odds, make his in-group survive and preserve as many of the traditions as he can. And that's kind of like my argument for like why I think he's like the most compelling reactionary cartoon hero. I mean, you have to compare him to Batman, right? But I think this guy has like better mental health,
and he falls for a Latina, so he fits in perfectly with the online right.
Yes, he does. He's a colonizer as well. But no, I mean that's kind of the joke that I've made previously on the show, where it's like almost everyone that I know, like people who live in Oslo, like men who who are like middle class guys who work in tech jobs. They will be with like a Norwegian woman, have 2.4 kids, and when they pass 50, they're just like so sick of the Norwegian woman that they just divorce and they'll marry some younger like Latina Asian woman or something like that. It just seems like a recurring pattern. And like with this guy, I caught myself almost finding like he's in the same pattern where he's been like with this gargoyle woman for like hundreds of years, and he's so sick of like dealing with this gargoyle bullshit that he wanted like a young Latina. Just to, when he's in his he's going into his twilight years, so he can just live without like a 29-year-old hot Latina woman. Right, yeah, I think that's enough on Goliath, and we can go look at.
Did you make character. The Chad Goliath meme?
No, I found it on the I found it on the one of the Gargoyles.
The texts
Reddits,
are a bit, but I'm talking about like the translation of the Chad into the Gargoyle.
Really no, but I made the photo on the upper right actually. I would have made it with the teeth. Actually, like it's actually a cosplayer, but I tried to splice him with the Giga Chad just for effect. Yeah. So if you flip the boards, then we have like the next main character.
Julius says this is why concepts like the will of the people are generally foolhardy wordless. People wanted you guys to speak about anime and shit. Now people complaining about speaking about gargoyles and to do cuisine. Yeah. Well, I don't really take. We do sometimes the polls just to gauge sort of like interest, but everything we sort of propose are things that we are interested in talking about. Specifically for the anime thing, I think it's just funny that the same people will call it cringe and give me, 30 seconds later, they're posting recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, the anime thing is coming back as well, right?
Yeah.
But we need some little bit more prep and planning for it. Okay, so here we have like
Elisa Maza.
We have the beauty here to Goliath's beast. That is the sort of spunky New York cop. I mean, originally she was the original idea for this character is that her name was going to be Lisa, I think Chavez, and that she was going to be Venezuelan. But because she is played by, Marina Sirtis, who is pictured there in the middle, right? And that's kind of like, they had to change up the character a little bit. She was just supposed to be like pure Latin American, but Marina has a very kind of diverse background. I think she has one Italian American parent and another parent who's like half Cherokee Indian and then half African and so on. So it's like this very, I mean, you can't see it, but it's like this very kind of American mutt type mix here. And yes. So they've taken her family background basically into the show. As I put the family picture on the left of her there, where you see like her father is this kind of Cherokee. No, he's not Cherokee actually. He's Hopi Indian. That's what the wiki says. See if we can get the 10% Hopi Indian. Right. Peter Maza. The mother is then Diana Maza. That's on the right in the family photo. That's like this Nigerian African studies major who's then revealed to be like heavily into African witchcraft later in the show. And this is like with the universe that we are in right now, like everybody who's anybody is doing magic in this universe. If you have a position of power, if you are like a politician or something, like you own a spell book or something, everybody who's gotten anywhere in this universe is using some kind of magic to get there, which is I think it's quite funny. So it's shown that she has like two siblings.
Glow in the Dark here was pointing out something. I was just about to make this point. He says for $5, Massa thought she didn't need no man until she met the Chad Goliath, and then she happily fell into his arms. And it's just instant as well. Like she has the bedroom eyes by the end of that episode.
Yes. And I mean, of course, with the kind of bizarreness of the human gargoyle thing, there's limits to how much you can show of, let's just say, like physical affection and so on. But it's kind of heavily implied that they have a relationship, and it's made explicit, I think, in season 3, where they actually kiss each other. So that's kind of as far as it goes. She has an older brother there. It's called Derek Maza, which I was quite confused because he looks like a regular American black man. In a sense, like he's so I was wondering if like these two, the parents, if they had children from a previous marriage and then they got together with one child each and then they had a third kid. That's like the younger sister in the top left there, Beth.
I see.
I mean, I don't know if you've gotten this far, and if that happens in the first season, but like her brother Derek.
No, I am not familiar with the Tiger Man, but I'm familiar with him as a character.
Okay, yeah. Well, spoilers. This is where we get into the spoiler territory. So, I mean, they work for the police force, and like you see the father as well. He's also a police officer, and it's supposed to be like
I'm familiar with that stuff. Yeah,
tradition in the family, but you know, Derek basically gets an offer from like one of these bad guys to go and work security privately for him, and the paycheck is a lot better, even though she's been warned multiple times by Lisa that like this guy's up to no good. Basically, he's just trouble all the way. But he's like, man, I ain't make shit, you know, like this. Like we talked about with the
paper.
Yeah, we got to get the paper, get the Mickey D's and the grills and the Nike shoes. So he goes to work security for David Xanatos, who basically turns him into a furry. Like that's his. I mean, yeah, that's one of the reasons he just wanted to have him to bring him on for genetic experiments. So there's a lot of people that either he brings in like he takes like homeless people off the streets to turn them into cats, and that's something in clan. It's called the Labyrinth clan, and they live kind of in the subway, where they have to like try to create their own sort of hierarchy and system for all of these kind of rejects of genetic experiments from David Xanatos and his corporation, which end up being quite a few by the end of the second season. So let's see what else is interesting about this character. She is a sort of competent character, and I feel like they blew all of the diversity budget on this one, and in some sense I feel like it's better in the sense like, okay, we're going to have diversity, so we're just going to put this character in here, and all of the
one character,
all of the biracial stuff is just going to be focused here, right?
And she's not going to be like strong, independent woman, etc., etc.
But yeah, she has just like, okay, it's super like biracial plus strong, independent woman, and then everyone else can just be normal in a sense. And of course, and then I just mean normal by just like standard, because she is kind of like a normal person in the show. She's not mentally ill like you see with some of these other characters. She is presented as being very competent at her job, almost like this kind of superwoman level competent, which is, I mean, you have the beginning there. Yeah.
She's a super cop in the same way that John McClane is a super cop. It's that 80s, 90s, American cop can do it all if they're just put in the right position, sort of.
Yes,
thing.
By themselves, of course.
She just happens to be a woman, quote unquote, right?
Yeah, I mean, and this is like one of the more subversive things, because you have the Clint Eastwood films of Dirty Harry, where he with the iterations of these movies, he goes through new partners, right? And the new partners end up dying, or they get lost in some sense, where he ends up having like female partners, and he doesn't want that. And like with this character, it's almost the opposite. It's like she's like rotating through male partners through the show that are eventually
they can't
she has
keep
to
up with her.
They can't keep up, or they get lost in some other scheme.
She also apparently, that's not a season 1 thing, but she apparently becomes a gargoyle at some point.
Well, yeah, this is actually something that only happens in one episode, where
okay,
you have one of these magical characters who's able to like turn gargoyles into people and people into gargoyles and so on. But yeah, I mean, later in the show there are the characters that are making clones of her that are like gargoyle clones that are spliced with other female characters and so on that kind of look like this. But this is kind of, it is a bit of like a fan favorite if you look at this fan community. There's going to be people who are really into this kind of like transformation.
The furries are really
stuff.
having a field day with this. Yeah.
People who are into like this type of body transformations, at least slightly less disgusting body transformations like this one. Yeah, I mean, I put the dude in the top there as well. He's like one of these gang leaders. So this is like, her plot essentially is that she's always fighting multiple gangs that are in New York, whether it's like old mafia or it's new families that are coming in from Eastern Europe and so on. Maybe that's something that happens in season 2, where you have people coming in from Czechia.
Yeah, that's not a season 1 thing. I had a feeling that the guy in the top right is like an ex-boyfriend of hers. Is that correct?
No, that's never actually
It's just implied.
stated.
Okay.
They have some chemistry, but it's not it's not clear in that sense.
Sure.
I guess it's just part of kind of this kind of flirting dialogue, because she is an attractive character, right? And that's made it's made a lot of allusions to in the show. But I think we've covered her nicely. I mean, she's not because she has so few weaknesses, that it also makes her a lot less interesting. In a sense, so that's why I put so much emphasis on like this biracial stuff.
Right.
That's what you're
Just
gonna get
it out of the
this,
way. Yeah.
in this retrospective. I have to like break down the phrenology of like of all the brown characters in the show to justify.
Well, I mean, that's why you're
that.
here if you're listening,
Yeah.
right?
No, most certainly.
I was gonna say, I forgot to mention it, but this here in the bottom middle picture, like the way they did it with the gargoyles, that when they're not using their wings, they're basically just wearing them as capes, is very cool. That's it.
Yes, I also think that's one of like these kind of Batman things that they did.
Probably, yeah.
But in that way, they can sort of fit into regular buildings and stuff, and
Yeah.
I guess the wings get really cluttered.
Just a very cool way of solving it. I think.
I mean, just a comment like these wings make me think of Soul Reaver. Actually, if that's something people are interested in the chat, maybe we should do like a show on that, because that's also one of these.
My wife is very much into that, and there's like 12 people in the world who are really into that game. I've learned. It's yeah.
It's similar in the sense that it's like this very Shakespearean heavy drama based game, and it uses a lot of these same. The same aesthetics. It comes from the same era. So this was, it's a big moment in the 90s where you had like this multi-integration, and people wanted to put, Shakespeare and heavy themes into video games and into products for kids and so on. I mean, it's not like perfect from our standpoint, but it's like 100 times better than the stuff that's on television currently.
Yeah, definitively. David Xanatos, who is totally not evil, guys. Trust me.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a pretty interesting bad guy.
Fair, yeah, he's. I wouldn't even say he's like a bad guy in a traditional sense. He's just a player on the board, really, with his own agenda.
Yes, I mean, there are other bad guys that come out, in shows that are similar to him. I've mentioned Eon Flux. That was also on the poll. And Eon Flux, you have the character of Trevor Goodchild, who is sort of a bad guy in the same way that this David Xanatos is a bad guy. He's a very Faustian character, I think. He's much more driven by like his need to kind of push the boundaries and to explore, and his will to power. That's sort of his big thing. He's not interested in revenge plots, which is typical for villain characters. Either that they have some kind of like cartoonish worldview that they're trying to impose, or they have
he lets
a vendetta,
them stay in their castle after they basically get him thrown into jail because he feels that he can control them in the future.
Yes, so he's not really like into. Okay, I need to get revenge on these people. He has big ideas about what he wants to do with technology because he basically has infinite money, right? He's kind of like a tech billionaire in this sort of John McAfee, Elon Musk style of tech, even though like he doesn't actually know anything about tech. He made himself rich with magic, which is something that I don't know if that was in season 1 or season 2, but
I don't know if they ever explained how he got rich.
There's this if you see the bottom left image here, where it shows that he basically has like this triangle pin that's really the Illuminati pin. And this is an episode where he marries one of these other characters from the pack, like the redhead that's in this American Gladiator gang that they end up fighting. And like for his marriage, he invites his own father, and he basically like asks Goliath to be his best man in the marriage. Basically, so this is sort of how he thinks. He'll just like drag people into his schemes, whether they like to or not, because they have to, right? It's not really because he has personal animosity towards them. He just wants to do his kind of like will to power projects, and other people just have to.
Oh, sorry.
Yes?
Glow in the dark again with $10. Try like getting out ahead of me. And something I wanted to point out in that Xanatos the nerd only wanted to be like the Chad Goliath, but couldn't and got butthurt find it funny that he's constantly competing with magic, mostly losing and barely surviving most of the time. In a sense, I feel like he's trying to sort of buy his way, or take the shortcut to the Chad status. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Luddic, I wanted to ask you because that's my interpretation of him as well.
That he tries to buy his way into it. I mean, I look at him very much as like, really, he has infinite money because he made his money with magic. And he sort of explains that like it's his entire story is sort of wrapped in this predestination paradox, where he explains to his own father, like, he comes from this poor family. That's a part of his backstory. So he's like a first generation technology billionaire. And his dad is very skeptical about how he made his money. So he basically explains that he can time travel. And he travels back to, the 1,000 years ago, basically to the year 997. And because he has like this sort of Illuminati insignia, he can just tell people who are in the Illuminati in the year 997 to send him stuff in the future that's going to be worth a lot on the stock market, or sort of like, okay, here's like a coin that Henry VIII used or something, and that's sort of how he made his money, and then he's just reinvested that into a technology business. So, which in a sense means that he has pretty much infinite money. And that's why he can get up to all of these experiments, and that's where he seems to have absolutely no regard for doing business. In a sense, you never see him actually administrating anything in the show. He does not make any deals. He doesn't oversee operations in his own company. He's just kind of the owner of the company who just wants to do cool stuff with the tech that's produced in that company. So he has like the sort of character that's standing behind him in the photo above, that like the blonde man with the glasses, Owen, who basically is like this kind of superhuman that manages everything that is going on in the company. Which, of course, spoiler alert, like this character is actually like a magical. Warren Buffett is it's probably the adrenochrome actually. I mean, Buffett is like, he's a much more boring character. He actually likes to do spreadsheets and stuff. Most of his investments are like these insanely kind of boring things.
That's also how he made his money. His idea is to basically, play the long game, and by that win. It's
slow and steady
strategy.
He didn't become a billionaire until he was like really, really old, right? So he's been sticking to buying these. I don't remember exactly like the financial term of what that is, but you buy these stock that are like, well, this company is kind of undervalued. They make bricks, so that's pretty boring. But it's the stock is a little bit too cheap for a brick company. So eventually, if I just buy up all of these, then I'm going to get rich. And of course, you could do that, and it'll work. It'll work pretty nicely in the long run, I think. But
his mantra is that, right? The only thing that wins in the stock market is time. So
yes, time in the market beats timing in the market. I think that's
exactly
a slogan in finance.
And this guy is voiced by Jonathan Frakes, who played William T. Riker in Star Trek: The Next Generation, the chair disrespecter himself.
I haven't watched that much show. Star Trek. He doesn't like his
No, it's not that. He has a thing where he like steps over every chair to sit on it. It's a weird like character thing he does. No other character does that, because Star Trek has these weird, strange, sort of like the seats they have in Star Trek are all like very low, right? So he's very tall, and so he steps over every chair before he sits in it instead of going around it. It's just a very strange character quirk that he developed.
I want to watch that show now, actually. Do you recommend it, or is it something that you had to?
Well, it's very much coached in like super liberalism, right? But it's not a bad quality show. I'll put it like that. He uses magic, but he doesn't trust it because he can't control it like technology. He literally fights gods with machines. He also has a Goliath mech suit, right? And that's my interpretation of it as well. I mean, that the only reason he makes the like mecha Goliaths is he ultimately says it's something that obeys me 100%. Because in the end, this guy is just a man. right?
Yes. He is just a man, and this is something that we're getting into later in terms of like who's actually pulling the strings in this world, right? But I mean, I said this is going to be like a spoiler review, so you see the picture there. He has the character behind him that administers everything. This character is named Owen, but it's revealed like very late in season 2 that the character Owen is actually an elf, right? Or it's called a fairy in like the Shakespeare play. He is the elf that's called Puck from A Midnight Summer's Dream. That's the Shakespeare play that has certain characters that are like these magical fairy characters. So he's actually like the reason that he can apparently do all of this business administration at the same time is because like he is just like a purely magical character who's signed a contract to just be in servitude to Xanatos until he dies. And the reason that he looks like that is because he's just he's just taken his entire appearance from the if you follow the red line, this character down here that's called Preston Vogel. That was like an actual COO kind of operator guy who was working for this old man who's called Halcyon up there, right? Like that's an actual self-made. The old man is an actual self-made tech billionaire who had like an administrator guy, and he just sort of copied that look to work for Xanatos and just made him blonde. Right. There's of course the plot here where there's this sort of rivalry between Xanatos and the Halcyon Corporation in terms of like they accuse each other of like tech theft and
stealing stuff,
stealing artificial intelligence.
What's the connection with the pack woman in the top?
Yeah, the pack woman is that he Halcyon basically married a woman that he had a child with, and the child is Fox, who basically becomes Xanatos' wife.
Okay.
And it's of course revealed that like the woman that Halcyon marries is actually an other characters from A Midsummer Night's Dream. That's like the Queen Titania that's like made herself into a human being, which means that then this Fox character is also like basically like a changeling, right? This sort of like elf that's actually posing as a human being. She then marries Xanatos and they have a kid together. That's like Alexander Xanatos. And because Alexander Xanatos has like elf genes, that means that he's also a changeling. And so this is like one of these big, actually surprising, it surprised me, these plots that come in at the end where, King Oberon, that's like the king of the elf, the actual like OG, most powerful person in this universe, comes to just take the kid. Like he says, well, this is like an elf
because he's
child.
Elf blood.
Yeah, it's an elf blood. So I'm just taking him back to Avalon, basically.
Nice.
And this is sort of like it's not only weird to have like this kid show, like I said, where you show two white people who have a kid together, and the kid is like actually healthy and they're happy about it, but then somebody else comes and try to steal the kid. It's quite a ballsy thing to put into a children's cartoon. So, I mean, of course, spoiler, they're able to, convince basically King Oberon of some kind of like, middle of the road settlement, some compromise where he kind of like strips Owen here, Puck, of some of his magic, and then Owen has to basically watch over this kid while it's in the care of Xanatos and Fox. And of course, the Goliath is the broker of that agreement. So in season 3 of this show, Xanatos takes a face turn. He basically stops all of these scheming, and he just tries to help Goliath and the Gargoyle clan after it's been made kind of public that gargoyles exist. So that's kind of the season 3 sucks basically, and I mean for a lot of different reasons. That's kind of the shift there, is that they move from a lot of these interesting characters with power play into now everybody knows that gargoyles are real and everybody hates gargoyles. So they form like this kind of like anti-gargoyles, Ku Klux Klan type movements that they try to avoid.
That sounds like season 3 stuff, right?
Yes, that's in season 3. I mean, another thing to note here is that you have the flow chart. That's, I mean, it's this concept I wasn't aware of. That's called like the Xanatos Gambit. It's this narrative tool where you have these bad guys who will apparently start some type of plan, and no matter what outcome that plan has, it's always a win for them. Like, so they have so many contingency plans that they always come out on top. And they've, I think that's the certain thing called TV Tropes Wiki that has a long list of every instance of this kind of Xanatos Gambit. I think they even mentioned that certain animes like Attack on Titan use this kind of narrative to device here. But this is something that Greg Weisman basically came up with, like this style of cartoon villain, which is why I said that there is like some meritocratic aspect to him getting the positions that he has, because he actually has
certainly,
some original ideas.
He's very much a
And-
schemer.
Yeah. Like, I mean, you see it with Greg Weisman, that's the show creator. He uses the same, narrative tricks in Young Justice. Like, the villains are very kind of similar. They always have these kind of plans that on top of plans on top of plans. And it always kind of ends up in a way where they gain something from it, even though it seems so like superficially that they don't. Right, I think we've done enough on him. We could jump on to the next bad guy.
Mona.
So this is then like Gargoyle's ex-wife from. I mean, it's not formally that way, but
This is what Goliath dropped for the Latina.
yes,
Yeah.
To
be fair, she did go all, let's kill all humans.
Yes,
which turned
I
him
mean,
off a bit.
if we contrast, there's a very nice contrast here. We have two villain characters. Xanatos is like this guy who's more interested in projects, like the bigger ideas, wanting to actualize cloning, artificial intelligence, immortality, mind control, and so on, where like this character, the Mona, is completely motivated by petty revenge in a sense, and that's like the only. She just wants to kill all human beings, and from a point of like complete irrationality, she's really sort of beyond. And I feel like that's kind of the female aspect coming in, without getting too chauvinistic. But that's why I think it's so perfect that this character is sort of a woman who has basically lived for 1,000 years. So I mean, getting into spoiler territory, it's actually revealed, it wasn't just the like the army chief who staged the sort of coup at the Vyron Castle. She is actually the main conspirator behind the.
Yeah, she wanted to use it to basically force Goliath and the other gargoyles to flee, because she doesn't like humans and they wanted them to live by themselves, I think was the
Yes,
reasoning.
I mean, she has a lot of ambitions that are kind of outside of it, but she has a complete sort of lack of ability to see the world outside of herself. In a sense, like her motivations are completely selfish and all about kind of her pain and her story, in a sense. So that's I mean, she is not frozen in stone like Goliath and the 5 other gargoyles. She actually survives, right? Yes, no female usurpers ever. She actually survives, and she has to try to escape the castle with some of these eggs and to try to protect these eggs. And she has like a 5-episode story arc where she goes through like this long explanation of how she got to the point where she is. And I mean, you can see the photo there where she has white hair, where it's revealed that they actually do age, and she gets quite old until she has some type of like curse put on her that grants her immortality, but also ties her to this other character, Macbeth, up here. That's also like
that's the one on the top left.
Yes, and he is in season 1, and it's not really explained exactly what his motivations are and how he knows people. But Macbeth was an actual like Scottish king, both in like real life and in the Shakespeare play and in this this kind of Gargoyles universe here. And
this one, he's just a dude with Scottish descent, isn't it?
Yes.
Or
well,
is
no,
he
he was a Scottish king actually, but he is almost as old as she is, because they actually work together with some type of pact where she was protecting his interests in his castle and so forth, but they were put into some type of curse where they're basically immortal and they're tied to each other. So the reason that he wants to kill the Mona is that he's suicidal. Basically, he doesn't want to live anymore, and the only way that he can die is that if she dies as well. So that's why she's always going after the Mona. Of course, she's not the only one, because living then 1,000 years hating human beings, she's made a lot of enemies, including like the hunter that's like on the bottom left here. That's more of like this kind of vigilante persona that a lot of people who have been wronged by the Mona at some point take on. So they put on this mask with sort of the claw marks that's representing like how she has clawed
the guy before them.
Clawed the guy before them. And so it's not only like one guy or a couple of guys. It becomes like this intergenerational thing where it's like, well, yeah, she killed my father, so now I have to put on the mask and do the same thing, and then they get killed, and their kids have to then come after her and try to hunt her, and they keep coming back with more and more advanced technology until it ends in a sort of climax at the end of season 2, where she attains some type of like nuclear device where she can she try to kill every human being in existence, and the entire 3 of these hunters are going to try to stop her from doing that because they killed her father at some point. So yeah, this character, it's just like pure destruction, magical, of course. She has a tie to the Archmage. That's another villain that exists for a couple of episodes. Who is I would like to try to describe his plot, but it's so tied in with this kind of time travel predestination paradoxes that I can't even. I don't think I'm even smart enough to explain it. That's how I felt after watching a lot of this time travel. It's either they just tried to be cool doing it, or they had put some actual thought into how this is supposed to work, where if you are like an engineer and you can try to map out all of these different paths through time, it'll actually make sense. But it kind of doesn't seem to, it doesn't need to make sense because it is just a cartoon, right?
Yes.
So let's see.
She's voiced by, I forget her name, but it's Counselor
Diana
Troy from Star Trek Next Generation.
So, No, so her name is Marina Sirtis, I think.
Oh, okay.
That's how it should be pronounced, if I'm correct. Quite attractive as well. Some sort of like Greek heritage. She's a lot older now, but I think she's also a very good fit.
Unfortunately, as most women, she age.
Yes.
But she's also the source of many a great holodeck meme on 4chan. You can look up that in your own time. It's pretty much various characters entering the holodeck and conjuring up extremely specific sexual fetishes using very often Diana Troy. And disengaging the safety protocols.
Yes, and of course this is a very sexualized character, right? I mean, you can, even if you just Google the name Demona, you put it in the Google image search, you're gonna find like these cosplayers who are getting into like this really erotic posing and so on. I mean, this aired, before, Web 2.0, high-speed internet, so like the amount of porn that exists of Gargoyles, it's a lot less than I expected. But they have like this kind of, well, yeah, I thought there would be a lot more, honestly. I mean, it might sound weird, but you have certain like shows that with like the amount of porn that are created of it, say something like Naruto or something, like the amount of Naruto porn that exists on the web is like, it's just insane. It's almost like this kind of Pareto distribution thing where it's like the 80-20 rule, right?
Right.
So it's like
it outgrows the show itself.
Yeah, it's just, I think so. I think there's probably, like, if you watched all of the Naruto porn, it would take more time.
But I do understand. I googled Demona Gargoyles, and every sort of cosplay I see is obviously, women doing it probably because they have to, literally be in a bikini.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. It's a little bit difficult to pull off if you're, let's say, if you're like short and stocky, or you need a specific build to do this character, right? There's not a lot of hidden things about her. And in the outfit, as you see, is skimpy. That's one of the things with these characters, is that they always wear like these really skimpy clothing, and it never it doesn't reveal anything, but it is quite sexually suggestive. It has another dimension.
Well, here you are, Nordanon. Only on the Longhouse.
Yeah, 6 degrees of separation, right? She also has another curse put on her, like, baggage is like a word that I think about with this character, like, because she's like lived as this very selfish, revenge motivated woman for 1,000 years, and she has like accumulated 1,000 years of baggage, including having a curse put on her where she becomes a human being, right? And you can see it if it's a curse or not, but she in season 2 it becomes in this way that she becomes a human being and during the day, and then she'll be a gargoyle during the night. So she is basically then gets twice the amount of waking hours as these other characters, right? Even though it doesn't lead to more screen time for her, but it kind of allows her to get into more of these schemes where she can sort of pose as a human being and actually partake in stuff like owning property and owning businesses and stuff. But yeah, I don't know if there's if you had any more impressions of this character that we should mention.
No, I think everything has been said or brought up in the chat here about, the female energy and destruction.
Yes, and of course, I mean, like in this show, you see very much that the plots are always generated from the villains, and it's very much the good guys who have to clean it up, right? That's sort of how I see this.
Yeah.
And she is very much by being this kind of chaotic woman who has caused so much destruction that like this is what creates the plot. That this is why you have a plot in a sense.
It's a bit strange in season 1 because she comes off as a lot more arbitrary than she apparently is, knowing her backstory. But it still checks out with her sort of like, for selfish reasons, trying to convince Goliath that no, we have to do it. I'm killing all the humans for you, right? But actually, she's just out for revenge because she hates humans.
Yes.
Glow in the dark. I like how Demona is self-centered, but she will never admit it. She always says she did it for others, like they did it to her, so she had no choice. Literally what I was saying.
Yeah, she's just like a perfect written female villain, right? So she has the physical talents, as you can say. She has intellectual capability, but there's just no insight there. There's no world outside of the self. It's always about her and her feelings, even though, she has all these other tools to try to process the world. But it just comes back to me and my things. And when you have that kind of like compounded with magic and guns and like 1,000
years of rage,
rage, then it's a great villain character.
We get to the wyvern. Is it wyvern or wyvern?
Yeah, I'm not sure actually. If there's some Scots in the chat, they could put this. What do you call it? Like when you're writing as it is pronounced.
Like a pronunciation language. Yeah.
You just put that in the chat and we'll display it.
Oh, there's the Robo brother in the top right.
Yes.
So I mean, he was like a late addition to the show. It didn't seem like he was intended to be there from the start.
No, I'm not sure actually. He gets a lot more time in the second season, where
because he shows up in like the second to last episode, I think, in the first season, and then they have to sort of do like a recap where they insert him into the 900
that was probably true. I don't think that he was meant that way, but they do use him to sort of like try to do more of this imaginary, mix between science fiction and magic, right? Because he is like one.
It's a very cool moment, like a riff on Frankenstein's monster, etc. When he wakes up and he's half gargoyle, half machine, and
he's patched together from 3 different gargoyle corpses, right? So this also results in him having 3 souls, right? Because that's the kind of show this is. So he has to then there's a lot of these plots in the episode that has to do with like the conflict between these 3 souls that exist inside of this one body, and the 3 souls are also in like this kind of romantic triangle drama where like there's 1 woman, 2 men, and one of the men is a little bit more evil, and they're in like this constant suspended limbo inside of his mind. That's like this kind of, it looks like this kind of digital, what do you call it, like this kind of new wave 80s retro wave type landscape where they just exist in perpetual limbo, fighting over control of the body. So there you have like the Shakespearean element weaved in with a lot of the newer sci-fi stuff. This ultimately gets resolved by Xanatos building 3 separate metal bodies, essentially, where he puts 1 soul in each body and they just fly off to go have their own adventures. I mean, it sounds very anticlimactic, but it's a very, mysterious episode until you understand what the twist is, right? But I wanted to then just take a look at the clan here. They changed the name to the Manhattan Clan because the Wyvern is a place in Scotland, right? So because they're not there anymore and they're in Manhattan, they have to have that name now. The Wyvern Clan, of course, included everyone who actually lived on in the castle in the year 997, and I mean, looking at this just from a design perspective, you can see that they had to put one color on each, right? It's a very effective way to distinguish them. I think if they had everybody be lavender purple like Goliath, it would be really difficult to kind of explain, which one you're talking about, especially from the kids' perspective. So you have from the left Bronx, that is this dog, and it's, I mean, this is one of the mysteries of the show that is just never explained.
Dog
why they have like a gargoyle dog, and he is apparently the only dog as well. There's no other.
I mean, some of this has to be explained by this being intended for children.
Yes, of course.
I mean, a lot of the front characters here are sort of, childish sub-stories.
They just exist for comic foil essentially, but it's also explained by the fact that they are younger, right? They are much younger than Goliath. They are kids who are sort of trying to be trained to take leadership positions. But like the dog there, they just named the dog Bronx. Dog helps a lot in many of the episodes, and he is a sort of plot device. It's sort of like, I wouldn't say Deus Ex Machina, but there's a lot of problems that they get in physical confrontations that are just resolved by the fact that they have the dog.
Not sure if he's being serious or he's joking here.
Yes, no, but
is he actually like a retarded gargoyle?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have considered the fact that maybe he is just like some sort of mutant or something, because it's never explained, right? And of course, you say that you're taking it too seriously. This is just a kids show, but you can see some of the footage from these cons, right? That people go to they have like this sort of gargoyle annual meeting. They've stopped having them now, but the footage that they have is like, you have a lot of people with high education. Like they had like a group of biologists who were trying to explain like the evolutionary origins of gargoyles, how that would be possible. I mean,
Jesus,
I thought it was a joke, but apparently they, that was one of the things they did on one of these gatherings, is just to sit down and try to explain the kind of evolutionary pathways to how this could have come about. So we're moving from the left to the right, and you have the character of Broadway, who is like this, what is this, more turquoise green. He's a fat character who was used more for comedic foil. Like, he's the character who shoots Elisa Maza with the gun, right? I mean, even until season
scene, because he just shoots and then she just, you can hear her flop or something, and he's like, "Oh, Elisa," and then he like peeks her on the corner, and she's just lying there in a puddle of blood. It's such a strange scene.
But the weird thing is that he never really has any arc outside of just being this comedic foil. But in spite of never really having any growth, he still ends up with
that one episode where he learns that shooting guns randomly is bad. And
I mean, of course he learns things, but he doesn't really stop being this kind of oaf character. I mean, in season 3, there's an episode where the Censorship and his wife Fox, they're sitting and talking about gargoyles and the problem with gargoyle perception in the media, right? Because there's like, you have these kind of like proto Tucker Carlsons who are talking shit about gargoyles on television, right? So, and they're saying that, well, we need to improve the image of gargoyles, right? So they end up just contacting Bronx, because he is like one of the more kind of gullible, self-absorbed, not Bronx, Broadway. And he's one of these more self-absorbed characters, and ask him if he wants to be a movie star. And they start kind of like staging these kind of fake rescue situations that are filmed on camera to improve, public relations for gargoyles, as well as putting him on this like this. They put him on a talk show as well, right? So I mean, that's kind of a funny episode, just for the fact that not for the fact that Broadway learns anything, but the fact that they included this. Like, they have these kind of rich megalomaniacal people who are trying to improve the perception of a minority group in spite of popular opinion. It's a little bit more on the nose than I expected. I mean, especially for a kids show, even though like season 3 is a lot more progressive, it's a lot more kind of like civil rights oriented. But it's true to form in the sense that popular opinion, like, people don't want to have gargoyles living in their city. And it's really like these kind of elite people who are constantly trying to push for more acceptance of these gargoyles. The other interesting thing about Broadway is that he actually is able to romance the character on the right, like the furthest right you go, that is Angela. that is the daughter of Goliath and Demona.
Oh, really? This is
Yes.
season 2 stuff.
Yes, it's in season 2 where they sort of explain that they were able to move some of these eggs into Avalon, which also exists here. Like this magic kingdom where King Arthur is actually suspended in is suspended in some glass structure and so
Nice.
on. But time in Avalon moves slower than time outside of Avalon, and that's why she's still, the correct age. That's the explanation.
young,
She's still
yeah.
younger than Goliath and Demona. And like this is one of these interesting kind of story points with this character, where Goliath has to move away from the tradition of this kind of shared parental situation that they have, like where the Gargoyles are all supposed to share parental responsibility, because it's just so obvious that it's his daughter, right? So he has to just start
Right.
using her name and bringing her on as his daughter. Of course, this creates problems because you have 3 like young male gargoyles who all have urges, and this is not something that they're being kind of shy about in the episode. So they have a lot of these episodes. They get some comedic momentum out of them trying to
woo the
impress,
woman.
trying to woo Goliath's daughter, which he seems fine with for some reason. Like this is one of the things that I think was almost a little bit out of character. I assumed he would be a little bit more upset with these like 3 loser characters trying to woo his daughter, particularly now that he knows that there are other gargoyles in Japan and in Latin America and so on that are like more alpha than these comic foil people that he spends his time with. But like the reason that I brought that up is like out of these 3 that you have Broadway, Lexington, and Brooklyn, that is the red gargoyle, and the brown one, like the fat one, Broadway is the one that actually ends up romancing Angela. And this seems to really have been a sort of mistake from the season 3 writers, because like when season 3 happened, they outsourced the entire animation to a different studio that were not really that familiar with the backlog of the previous episodes, and they probably misunderstood one of the things that happens in the last Cold Stone episode with this cyborg here, where they try to actually extract the souls from this cyborg into robots. So the first thing they do is that they extract the souls into other gargoyles. So they extract two of these lover souls into Broadway and Angela, and they basically become physically intimate as avatars. But if you just looked at that and you don't have any context for why that is happening, then you'd think that these 2 are romantically involved, and that seemed to have gone on to the 3rd season because they didn't really understand why it was happening. So it's completely peculiar. She is a very like high functioning kind of alpha female, and he's like this fat loser character. I mean, you have these relationships on TV. I just found it to be it's a little bit hard to explain in light of the rest of the plot. Okay, so we're moving from the left here again. That you have Lexington here. That's like the manlet brown gargoyle, and his big thing is computers. Really, that's sort of the reason that he is there. He provides some comedic momentum as well. I think in season 1 he has like an episode where he tries to join a biker gang or something.
Yeah, but he also ends up helping Demona. Like she convinces him that she's right, and he lures Goliath into a trap, basically.
I think that I don't think that's Lexington. I think that's actually Brooklyn, the red one.
Oh, sorry, Brooklyn. I thought we were talking about Brooklyn. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm talking about the brown small.
Oh yeah.
Gargoyle.
He at least in the first season is just filler.
Yes, I mean
speedrunner for about $10 says I don't even like watching all the seasons anymore. If anything, it always goes bad after the first season or 2, no matter what. That seems to be the case here as well. Yes. Unfortunately.
I mean, you can never stay visionary forever, right? And sometimes it's very hard to end these shows, so they just end up being these properties that are just pushed between studios, and they try to cut costs and so on. So it's both being subjected to more of these kind of like low, to say people who aren't so high in the hierarchy who will do it for cheaper. That combined with like all these civil rights, requirements and so on. Like I imagine like a lot of these studios that they set it out to, they're not going to try to be subversive or anything. They're just going to be thankful that they get the show, so they're going to put in as much civil rights stuff to please
signals of compliance. Yeah.
Okay, the filler character Goliath we've covered already. So further we go to the right, you have Houston. That's like this older character who was
Hudson.
like the Hudson, yeah, who was the he was the alpha male of this clan before Goliath, basically. So he's been more of like his mentor to Goliath, and he continues to have a bit more of this like this old man, role where he tries to advise the younger generation. He's also the only gargoyle who's figured out how to use a knife. Right, that's kind of his thing.
He's pretty based with it as well. He does some pretty cool moves.
Yeah, I mean, he has a lot more to do in these plots, where especially in the when they have callbacks to stuff that happened in the past, he's much more involved with it. Much of his arcs in like the later seasons just have to do with him trying to cope with getting older. So,
right.
And then we have Brooklyn, that's like the red gargoyle here, who is a bit more like, if you look at all of these other young characters, he was sort of supposed to be the one that's going to be the next in line if Goliath gets too old. But it's kind of difficult because he is a bit of he just doesn't have it, right? You can kind of see it on him that he's not really. He doesn't have what it takes, basically, and he makes certain improvements, and they try to put him in.
He's not going to make it.
Yeah, he's not going to make it. They try to put him in like a leadership position because there's this longer arc in season 2 where Goliath, the Elisa Maza, and the dog Bronx have to go off and travel all around the world to go see these mythological creatures, and they put Brooklyn in as like this interim leader, but he's not really able to do as good of a job. He doesn't have the physicality. He doesn't have like the mental acuity to do this stuff, and he gets cucked quite a lot. He gets cucked because he tries to romance Angela, but he gets cucked prior to that as well. He tries to romance one of these furries. There's this furry character that's actually just a homeless woman that Xanatos pulled in to do experiments with like his biotech guy, Dr. Savarius or something, and he tries to romance that character, and that doesn't go well for him. Then he later tries to romance the Goliath's daughter, and that doesn't work. So it's he's a bit of a pitiful character, even though he plays. I think he's a bit more of an active role than some of these other characters.
He certainly, speedrunner says total beta moves, and he feels like he's constantly like a pawn for everyone else, it seems.
Yeah. I mean, because he's a simp, right? And that's why he's being fooled by Demona on multiple occasions, right? He'll just do anything for a little bit of female attention. I think we covered this one nicely. Let's take a look at the
Glow in the Dark with a good point here for $5. Hudson is shown as a competent leader and not just for laughs. He may be more lax in his age, but he will do what he needs to do. Exactly. He usually is the advisor to Goliath as well on many points when Goliath is being sort of unreasonable, right?
Yes.
He'll be the one who's like, come on, it's time to go, right?
We've done enough, right? He's still a very smart and competent character. Although he's settling much into this old man role, right? He's getting too much into television and crosswords. I think his energy is being sapped by
modernity.
Yeah.
Okay, this seems like I've seen none of these, so this must be either season 2.
Yeah, this is season 2 stuff, right? Where they get to this long arc, and I mean, the reason that they do this is really, I like I said, I don't want to do too much behind the scenes stuff, but the first season is 13 episodes, and the first season was considered a success within Disney, so they were commissioned the second season, and that's the season with 51 episodes. So it was quite a jump in terms, like, you have the same time schedule of 10 months to produce 50 plus episodes, and not just 13. So you end up with a lot of padding.
I'm assuming the things they set up in season 1, the ambition was probably quite grand in terms of the story they wanted to tell.
Yes, they had and you see that in season 2. There are a lot of these really ambitious stories in season 2, but you have like a 20 episode streak that is really just Bronx, Elisa, and Goliath traveling on a boat going to various countries around the world, meeting people, meeting like mythological creatures, and doing these one-off episodes where they just try to resolve problems. And I can, of course, say that it's padded to meet the requirement, but what I think is so interesting about this episode is how perfectly 90s they are in representing all of these cultures, where every culture is valuable, right? Every culture is shown to have something that they can use, whether it's like some kind of alternative indigenous medicine, or it's like samurai martial arts techniques, or it's a certain way they live or do things. They even interact
Based
with a
on the
lot
local
of
mythos and culture.
yes.
Yeah.
They like, this is where you get the Norwegian episode, right, where they go to Norway and they meet Odin.
What's the
right?
the Norway gargoyle? That's the Odin.
No, there's no gargoyles in Norway, right? But they have Odin there, and Odin is just basically mad because he wants an artifact that they have, and that's like, the episode is basically Goliath refuses to give him the artifact, so he uses the artifact himself, and he becomes like this type of demigod. But he's not able to handle the power, so he has to just give it back to Odin.
Right.
And that's kind of it is kind of a cool episode. One thing to understand here as well is that these episodes seem like padding, but the way that they tie it all together is to say that in this universe, all of the mythological creatures, whether it is like the Celtic mythology of the Banshee, or the Irish mythology, like the Easter Island stuff, like Japanese creatures, like Latin American mythological creatures, and so on, everything is kind of emanating from King Oberon. That's like the king of the fairies. These are his children.
Right.
So he created all of the mythological creatures, and he sort of punished them to live among the humans, to kind of to learn to sort of appreciate human life and human let's say human values. And it wasn't completely clear the way that it was presented. Right. But when they finish up all of these kind of globe-trotting episodes, he has to pull them all together in Avalon to have this kind of like grand meeting, a grand reunion of all of these characters. And of course, there's a lot of resistance, and that's what you see is creating the drama in like this kind of universe. Is is like these magical creatures who get into struggles with each other. So let's see. I mean, the bottom left there is really not the Gargoyle clan. Like, this is the Labyrinth clan. That's the furries and clone rejects. I don't know if you can zoom in a little bit so we can take a look at.
I can't using this.
No.
Well, maybe I can do I can do this.
That's better. Pretty good. I mean, if you can see that there's some familiarities there. There's a gargoyle that looks like Elisa Maza. Do you have another gargoyle that looks like Hudson? That looks like.
Well, you have Lexington and Brooklyn on the right there. Yeah.
Evil Lexington, evil Brooklyn, evil Broadway, in sense. So this is like a part of the storyline where Xanatos creates like this kind of spliced clone that's a clone of himself and Goliath that becomes like this evil Goliath clone. And the evil Goliath clone just basically, he's like too smart, so he just breaks off from Xanatos and starts making a lot of money and building his own organization. And in order just that he can just build like a rival clan of clones, and he even he builds himself like a new wife essentially out of, like, he splices Demona and Elisa's DNA into like this gargoyle that you see on the left. And it sounds completely ridiculous, but like that's actually the plot. So the furries that are in between there, like the one in the middle, the panther is Derek Maza. That's Lisa Maza's brother, who was experimented on, and then eventually he just takes to owning this role, so he just refuses to be turned back, so that he can just maintain this kind of shelter for like magical and scientific outcasts in the subway, where they have one, they have a plot about some internal rebellion inside of this small community that they've made, and they will make appearances on occasion. So let's see the upper left picture there, stuff like the Japanese kind of like Bushido clan, and this is just one episode, but they have some pretty cool designs, even though they never come back. On the upper left, you have like the South, these kind of Latin American gargoyles, And on the bottom left, you have like the London clan.
Bottom
There's
right, you
mean? Yeah, sorry, the bottom right.
Yeah.
You have the London clan there with Griff, Leo, and Uma that I want to just go into a little bit later. But
Right.
I think that has to be like, aside from season 3, one of the cringier moments. Maybe I mean, I made a specific slide for this thing, but I see we're kind of we've gone pretty far into the stream already. I think we're 2 hours in, so I mean, like the storyline that they have with this Griff character, he is essentially like this kind of like British punk rocker Antifa gargoyle. I mean, it's not even.
You send me some clips, and it's very strange.
It's not even a joke. Like, his thing is that they live in like 1940, right? And he is actually like fighting Nazi fighter pilots and so on. And he's just harping on about like gargoyles have to unite with the British to fight the Nazis. Like, that's the only way that the world is going to survive. And they just go into the future where like, after the Nazis have been defeated, all he does is just run around to try to find like British this kind of British ethno-nat gangs to break them up and to try to save refugees. Maybe you'll just show a bit of the clip.
Well, I haven't. Well, I can show it from my screen here. Just give me a moment, because I'm too afraid if I show all of it, we'll be taken down. We'll show him fighting.
Maybe you can just show the first clip, and I'll just narrate what exactly they're talking about. So we'll just have no sound.
Let's see here. Where did it go?
I think you have it in the Telegram chat. But...
Yeah, no, but I downloaded all the clips. Just give me a moment here.
Yeah, the history is getting too long. Too many.
No, I specifically downloaded the videos before the show, but I seem to have lost the Griff clips. I'm gonna have to try to save it. I don't know if that's gonna take too long. Let's hope not.
Well, yeah, I think it is a minute clip. Maybe you can try to save it, and then we could.
All right, I've started the saving process again. So if we can just jump ahead, and I'll tell you.
We'll just keep moving, and we'll save it for later, right? I think it's a little bit of a nice little nugget from the show. Right, if you flip the slides again, we could look at some of these other villain characters that make an appearance. So, in season 1, like you have a season that's just dedicated to these characters here, and there are so many characters in there, so just like so many villains. But there's a reason in particular that I thought that these were interesting. So if you look at the upper right photo from the left, you have the it's like they're all named after dogs, basically. So you have then Wolf on the left, who's explained to be like actually a descendant of Håkon the Viking. That was the Viking who ransacked the castle. So there's like this kind of deep ancestral connection to him and his fight against gargoyles. Then we have Dingo, that's just like a regular Australian man. Fox, that's actually the
average Australian on the
he's just an average Australian. I mean, I'm not kidding. That's kind of his identity, right? That's
how they look.
The most normal crocodile hunting Australian man. Fox we have in the middle here, who is the daughter of Queen Titania and Halcyon. He marries Xanatos. So she breaks away from this gang basically before they get into like this real weird genetic modification transhumanism stuff. And on the right here you have the two Canadians. You have the Hyena and Jackal, who they are apparently twins, and these are like become some of the most persistent villains characters in the later, in season 3, because they are completely deranged. So in the beginning, they are just sort of hired in by Xanatos as to just be like this kind of security troop, and they also have a TV show that's similar to American Gladiators, if I'm not wrong. So that's where you get the look from. But they're more interested in actually doing like big game hunting and war and fighting than doing television shows. So they end up then scuffling and trying to hunt down the gargoyles, which they fail spectacularly at that. So then they're offered by Xanatos artificial intelligence stand-in, if you see on the bottom left picture here,
Yep.
That becomes like the sixth member of the pack. That's let's see if Coyote is his name.
Right.
And he's just made to look like a dog, but he is essentially just a robot Xanatos, right?
Yeah, he's one of the gargoyle robots. Yeah.
And no, he's not even. He was a gargoyle robot, so they make multiple iterations of him, but he's just a floating head in a sense.
Right.
And he just comes out and says that, okay, well, you got your ass handed last time, but maybe you're interested in some enhancements, quote unquote. And this goes in a pretty dark direction because they're being offered basically either genetic modification or cybernetic enhancements, where you get into a bit more of this kind of transhumanist stuff. I mean, you see Wolf here, he just, poetically, he just has himself enhanced to have like bear or wolf genes or something, to be like a more like the an actual like burlier animal. But the twins here, Hyena and Jackal, they actually go for like this full transhumanist makeover, entailing that they actually remove healthy limbs and tissues to replace them with robotic parts, to be honest. And it's not just something that they show off, but the Australian character who is on the right here, on the picture down here, he comments on this multiple times that he finds it disturbing. He didn't actually get any cybernetic enhancements. He just has like an Iron Man suit.
He's just a suit of armor. Yeah.
So he has no genetic enhancements and no cybernetic enhancements. And because he felt so alienated by all of the damage that these other characters had done to themselves, he chooses basically to leave the group just to be like a superhero in Australia. That's kind of his arc. But like for these other two, they get into a lot of stuff. I don't know if you want to show some of the clips. You could show the clips without the sound, where they use some of these like transhumanism, these kind of transhumanist effects. I find it quite disturbing, honestly, especially for children's cartoon.
I can show that. The Griff video is also ready when we want to see that. Glow in the Dark for $20 American. Thank you very much. I think I know why the first few seasons of most series are usually the best ones. In the beginning, they had to prove themselves to be creative. Then it gets popular, special interests get involved with money investment. Yeah, it's a very, on the surface, it's very often that's what happens. The creative and the talent sort of gets pushed out for corporate interests. But I think in modern day, it's a lot more insidious than just a business decision.
Yeah,
what
certainly.
Do you think, Luddic?
I mean, they have the term that's called a cash cow. I took a business course once, right? There's like this reliable product that just keeps pumping out cash. And I mean, you see that now where they have, the world's population is so old, right? There's so much nostalgia going on, and every movie that's being pumped out is something that's like old, reliable, boring stuff.
It's so Star Wars remake number 1 million, right?
And it's just intellectual property being reused, right? It's just being reused for either just to get some cash in the pockets of the investors and to promote certain political agendas. Like there's no actual creative vision. There's no place for it, right? It's just completely suffocated by the inertia of the system. Okay, here you have the clips. So you can just show them without sound, and I guess I'll just make some comments here. So here we see the dog in action, Bronx, who's bitten off the arm of Jackal here, and there you go. Of course, you see it's a completely like mechanical arm. There's no flesh or anything. So he bites it off, and he thinks he's gotten a win, but the arm just sort of apparently has a mind of its own, and it can just crawl back, and they could put that in there. And of course, this used to like he just had like healthy arms and legs, right? This thing is this character is like the worst. You see some of these bending things that she does with her body, and now like prepare for this one.
Ugh. That activated some fear response. I'm just trying to fight the algorithm here for not getting us.
We're fighting the algorithm, and we win.
Yeah.
But like this one is actually like these two things are the okay, you'll see it.
He also says that special interests can mean activists too. That's very true. And in that sense, yeah, you're right. Snaking their eyes back. Yeah, so they go really hard on that stuff, huh?
Yes, they do. And they are like, it does reflect their mental state, because they are shown to just be completely demented characters in terms of how far they're willing to go and what they're willing to sacrifice. Like the hyena character, that's like the Canadian woman with the spider body. She, in multiple episodes, she actually expresses sexual interest for Coyote. That's like just the big robot, basically, and it's not just like played for laughs. She's apparently like sort of aroused by this like big hulking machine body, in a sense. So I mean, it's like, I think if you're a kid, you're probably not noticing that stuff, but for me, I mean, I see that it's a sort of cartoon, but the kind of implications of it, it's it made me feel a little bit
made me feel uneasy.
Yucky.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, I think we could move on to some more fun.
Do we want to hit the Griff video?
Yeah, let's no, I mean, the next slide is like related to that anyway. No, it's not this one. You can actually skip to the anti-fascism
okay,
slide.
Let's do
here.
this first. Yeah,
because this is the thing that that sort of creeps into the show, that it's both. I can't believe they included that stuff here, and I this is like really cringe. But the Golem, they actually have an episode where they travel to Prague. And they have like this Orthodox Jewish community that has to summon a golem to protect themselves against Romanian gangsters or something. It's no, actually, now I remember, it's actually the Halcyon, the billionaire, who wants to become immortal, so he tries to steal the golem from the Jewish community, but they're able to fight him back with the help of the trusting gargoyles. So, I mean, on the bottom right picture there, they have like the main antagonist in season 3, where that's really called the Quarrymen. That's like the stand-in for, this kind of hooded Ku Klux Klan type organization, which apparently have, in spite of being completely inconsistent ideologically, they apparently have like infinite amount of recruits, infinite resources, and they have access to everything at all times. So that's where you see like a lot of the weaknesses in season 3, where in season 1 and 2, it's very much about trying to explain how things are done and how people know things and how people have learned things and why some people are more powerful than others. But in season 3, it's just, we just throw all of that out of the window, and we're just going to have these villains who can just do everything everywhere and who are extremely racist for no reason. So it's like, okay, we maintain the liberalism, but the IQ has just completely dropped, which is also kind of what happened in real time, with liberalism. Because that's when I'm talking about the 90s nostalgia, that's what the nostalgia is for, right? There's like this, there was some intelligence behind this stuff, behind this thinking. There was some nuance, but now it's just completely brain dead. So you can watch watch these 2 clips here of Griff telling us. Let's say it's oh, you have it bad, and then he's like dramatically smashing. Oh, you think other people have it bad or something? No, we have to. It's the Nazis that are the problem, right? We have to defeat the Nazis. Unless we get together and fight the Nazis with the humans, then everything is just going to go to shit. And then the Lion is like, well, it's not our problem, right? We should just be isolationist and look after ourselves. This is a human problem. This is not a gargoyle problem. And he's right. He's right, Griff. And then he walks over to Goliath. Well, what do you think? And then he's like, he's a little reluctant about it, but sometimes human problems become gargoyle problems. Like, that's his conclusion. So he tries to then help Griff fight the Nazis using a time machine, in a sense. And if we go a little bit, I just put in that put in the pause here to defeat the algo. Maybe you could put a little bit of sound on it. Yeah, we're not hearing anything, but this is what's happening here. It's like this band
I'm not
of,
sharing audio. I'm sorry. I should be. Hang on, give me a moment. Let's try this again.
Yeah, we could always do it with the narration, but it would be fun just to get the the audio.
That's true. I can't do audio when it's not a browser.
Okay,
it's
well, just run it again, and I'll try to explain what's happening. Will save us the copyright strikes, hopefully. So yeah, it's going to be running with like the black screen a little bit. Is it? There we go. Okay, so we're in like modern England, and now there we have like the refugee Albanian, right, who's being threatened by the skinheads, and like point. how is that a way to treat your neighbor? Like, and then he gets, then the posse comes in and they start, punching the Nazis basically. And they have to run off and
We're
don't come back, right?
BTFO'd once again. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're together again. We're keeping the streets of London safe or whatever. Yeah, don't tell him about the Rotherham scandal, right?
Right.
I
Don't
mean,
tell them
I
about
assume,
that.
he thought about the. But I mentioned this to you in like the pre lobby, is that I remember parts of the 90s and particularly the attitudes towards certain ideology where there was a lot of room to have different opinions and to actually have like a dialogue in a marketplace of ideas. But at the same time, it was sort of understood that like actual dyed in the wool Nazis, like car carrying Nazis, would not be a part of that dialogue. It was explained to me very explicitly that if somebody showed up with jackboots, bootstraps, like a swastika tattoo in the face, looking like Edward Norton in American History X or Russell Crowe in Romper Stomper, like you were allowed to punch them basically, and the police wouldn't do anything.
Yeah.
So like this sort of Antifa punch Nazi stuff, it's not new. Like I remember this from my childhood, but at that time it was understood that you meant actually explicit Nazis, right? People who were actually just sort of like self-identified,
Neo-Nazis, yeah.
Neo-Nazis. Usually part of the punk rock community as well, and not
people who were anti-European or anti-EU,
Yeah.
I mean, or anti, gay.
Not because you were uncomfortable with trans people on Netflix, right? That's not what they meant. They meant like actual, swastika on the forehead people.
Glow in the dark for $5. He keeps donating to the fund a lot tonight. Thank you for that.
Yeah, we're gonna retire after this.
Guys. The KKK guys, I think, represent how people keep resisting the activists. They don't understand where or how they exist or resist, but they are there. I think you're right. It's one of those things where once you've built an apparatus, you don't want to tear it down once your initial task has been completed. You're just gonna find something else to do. And ideally in a managerial system like we live in, you want to find something that's perpetual so you can keep going forever. And if you can create an organization where everything around you looks like a nail and you have a hammer, then you're good to go for a number of years.
Yeah, no, but I think like to Glow in the Dark's point, from the perspective of the activist class, and this is again going back to some of the behind the scenes stuff, because season 3 was outsourced, right, from the in-house Disney studio onto, let's see, I noted it somewhere
it's
here.
in the last slide or something.
It's Nelvan Studios, right? And some of the people who came on to write that show are the people who wrote X-Men, right? And the early sort of 80s X-Men cartoons. And X-Men has like this very progressive pro-LGBT type undertone. It's sort of seen as like being this flagship franchise even before LGBT was like become this super mainstream thing that was considered like this especially gifted gay youth in a sense. So they came much more from that kind of black and white perspective of like this constant wave of bigotry that just keeps showing up. It just keeps it keeps persisting no matter how hard, no matter how much money you put into it, and no matter how good they are, because that's also made very clear that it's completely black and white. Like the Gargoyles are the good guys. Like they are the civilized people here. And that's always
very strange because having watched season 1, it doesn't quite feel like that. It's a lot more shades of gray.
Yeah, I mean they do, because like guys like Greg Weisman, who had this kind of I'll just call it like the enlightened liberal approach, right?
Yeah.
They could see things in terms of shades of gray, and that there was nuance, and that you had to think about being practical and respecting people's rights, even though that meant seeing stuff that you didn't agree with and so on. But they were in the minority, right? They were always very much in the minority of the liberals, and the vast majority.
Greg
of the left
Weisman
always,
would be a why I left the left guy, right?
Yes, yeah, I think so. If he was actually politically engaged. Now, I don't know too much. I'm not going to like project stuff onto him. But
assuming.
There's more of this kind of classical liberal, or the left isn't cool anymore thing. But I mean, they don't actually have any conservative convictions, but they kind of respect your right to have them, in a sense. And I'll take that any day over the stuff that we have now.
Sure, yeah. Now, so you had a slide here called Shakespeare.
Yes, I mean
We have
we've
to dunk
already
on the elves.
covered so much of this of this stuff already in the other slides, but there's a lot of Shakespearean influences here, and I could have named the slides some other things, but I put together a little meme of the puppet hierarchy that is kind of like, this is how the world in Gargoyles works, where you have on the bottom there, it's really the politicians who seem like they're running things, but they're actually controlled by criminal
For those
gangs.
of you watching this at home, you can use that graphic as an exercise and try to swap in your own types of people and groups and see what you end up with.
No, I think with like these recent Moldbug articles, it's actually quite prophetic. I mean, this is not, it's not said outright or made explicit, but when I was just thinking about it a little bit, like the universe that they're actually presenting here, and as they're unraveling all of these twists in Gargoyles, I realized, like, okay, this is what's actually going on. It's it's
We're
like,
working our way up
yeah,
to the elves.
tech billionaires, but it's kind of revealed. You know, they have a lot of episodes about secret societies. Even one of the partners of Elisa Maza, that's called Bluestone, who has spent his life, like, he spends all of his spare time trying to uncover Illuminati, essentially, and he succeeds.
Uh-huh.
And then he gets an offer for a membership. But you realize that all of these, even whether it's like the criminal kingpins or it's the tech billionaires or anybody who's anybody is like a member of the Illuminati in this series, but they're really not that powerful compared to the elves, which is really are really just like Oberon and everything that stems from Oberon's family. You have Oberon there; he's like the blue elf king, and to his right, there's a picture of Puck. That is like this minor elf, and like these are from A Midnight Summer's Dream, right? Where Puck is really considered more of like this mischievous character, and his thing is that he, you know, initially you just think he's like this trickster who gives people wishes, like this sort of monkey paw thing, where he'll take your wish completely literally, and you end up getting like a bad outcome, and he thinks it's really funny to mess with people, but you then realize that like he is basically Owen, like he's the henchman of Xanatos, and he's been that way the whole time. He's actually pledged his entire life to just always be like the constant servant and henchman of Xanatos, and later he ends up having to then be like the godfather of Xanatos' son and teach him magic, and that's kind of the agreement as to how they get to keep the kid instead of it just being transported to Avalon. So I mean, Oberon is sort of like this supremely powerful being, and his only weakness is apparently pots and pans. Like it sounds completely retarded, but it's like if you have like some metal object that you can bang together, he can't stand the sound of it, which it's really his only weakness. But other than that, he's like this kind of like game-breaking, powerful creature in this universe. And as you're seeing, like with his wife, you know, Titania, that they apparently, you know, divorced, and she's just gone out and like, you know, slept with human beings and created half human, half elf, like these changeling children everywhere. Yeah. And then she gets back together with him later, right? But that's where you see so a lot of the underlying force behind some of the drama that's going on here. It's like these really like these internal elf conflicts that's actually, you know, pushing the you know, that's where the real power is in this universe. It's not in the money, because you can just create infinite amounts of money, and in the organizations and so on, it's the people who actually control magic. So with the picture above Oberon there and Puck, you see like the weird sisters, so the three sisters that are present in Macbeth, and they are like these recurring characters who they, you know, they put spells on people and they drive the plot forward, even though like they are, you know, inhabitants of Avalon and they work for Oberon. So they are the people who create this sort of curse that ties Macbeth and Demona together in immortality forever. And they do a lot of these you know, they have to
sort of guide the hand of history in the universe.
It's certainly, and that's why I put the hierarchy together like this. So that's sort of my conclusion. I mean, there are other ways to interpret this, but like this is like my final sort of interpretation of the Gargoyles universe. So yeah, I don't really have that much more to say. I think we've covered so much of like the behind the scenes lore.
I think
where these people fit in. Yep.
Just don't trust elves, guys, even dark ones.
Yeah, I refer to the picture at the bottom there. So, okay, the ending for this show. I put some pictures in here from these cosplaying conventions. I mean, they're amazingly funny. We talked about like the Mono cosplayers. right?
Yeah.
Can you enlarge this one so we can get a closer look at the Mona and Xanatos?
That's the best I can do.
Yes. I just love these because you talked about how you need to be, you need to be like this kind of athletic, almost model female to do the cosplay.
Sell the.
But
Well, I mean, a lot of cosplayers, I suppose, these days would contradict you, the athletic path. Everyone can cosplay.
yes, I mean,
because everyone is beautiful.
A for effort, right? But I mean, that's what this stuff is. It is just like wish fulfillment, and the people who are into this stuff who are like, less,
even
less
though the cosplay is like a loincloth.
less physically gifted, people who kind of dream that they could be something else. So yeah, I think it's absolutely perfect with these two people. These are pictures that are taken at these Gargoyle cons that they're not being held anymore. But
right.
Yeah, so season 2 was really like a sort of make or break for Gargoyles, right? And if season 2 had been more commercially successful, then it would have been able to continue as a sort of in-house Disney property, but it wasn't. So, and I mean, a lot of people, I've seen these other retrospectives where they blame the fact that this was running concurrently with Power Rangers, right? And people wanted to watch Power Rangers instead of Gargoyles, and it just kind of gave a clear signal to the management that like running this type of show, it's interesting, but it's not really profitable.
Right.
In that style. They also talk about the O.J. Simpson's case that went on the air at the same time, where people were like more interested in watching O.J. Simpson trial than Gargoyles. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
our show failed because of the O.J. Simpson trial. That's a lie.
That's at least one interpretation of what happened. So season 3 just goes back to being a 13-episode season. They outsource it to the Nelvana studio, and so you lose basically the original visionaries. You lose the script writers that they had. Greg Weisman only has like one writing credit. He wrote the first episode in season 3, and then he just kind of jumped off to just be a consultant on the show. I mean, even fans of the show who are progressives will admit that season 3 was crap.
Right.
It's not like horribly bad. It just doesn't have the same quality as the previous show. The animation is worse, right?
The spark is gone. Yeah.
Even though the animation consistency of the season 1 and 2 is also a little bit willy-nilly, right? Some episodes look really like top tier anime, and others look a little bit more makeshift.
Okay, so the quality itself of the drawings is
it's a little bit back and forth, like in the previous seasons, but in season 3 it's even worse. All of the dynamism has just gone, and like some of the episodes seem to have different animators as well, so the styles seem to shift a little bit, and it's a little bit jarring to watch. So and the plots themselves go much more in this kind of very simplistic, like I said, the civil rights direction. Like that's one of the things, like in episode 1, where Goliath just basically has this long speech about how he should be able to just do whatever the human beings do and have the same rights as humans, and marry a human woman and stuff. And it's completely out of character for him.
I want to mix with humans.
Even though he's a bit of like a closet colonizer, he is very much a sort of duty bound creature, right? Who
yes.
He's driven by this kind of very traditional duty that he has.
He said so in the first episode that the Gargoyle's nature is to protect that which he loves or something, right?
Yes.
And that is his own clan and originally, of course, the humans he had made the deal with.
Exactly. So that's why they're so attached to the castle as well, even though it's put on top of a skyscraper.
Yeah, but he really doesn't want to leave it because he promised to protect it.
But in season 3, you can interpret it 2 ways. You can either interpret it as the fact that they did not bother familiarizing themselves with the original material, because there's a lot of episodes that seem to either contradict or just completely ignore what's happened in the past, where you have to do the same storyline multiple times. Let's say with Brooklyn, like the Red Gargoyle, who's going to be like this the interim leader for the Gargoyles. He has an episode where he kind of elopes from the Gargoyles to just be with like a gang of young kids who live on the street, And this seems
Right.
completely unnecessary because they already had like episodes in season 2 where he sort of tries to be a leader and he rebels a little bit and then he falls back in line. Now, okay, I've learned my
He's
lesson.
already
And he has
tried to do that, yeah.
So he has to do the exact same arc over again. And there are some episodes like that where it's not necessarily badly done. It's just completely ignoring everything that happened previously. David Xanatos seems to be like completely cucked in this season, where at the end of season 2 he just kind of makes peace with Goliath and says that, okay, I'm just going to just support you now because you like protected my kid, essentially. So, but he doesn't do any of his standard megalomaniacal experiments, and in terms of actually being able to protect them, it's like one of these shows where a character goes from being a heel to being a face, and then they're like 1/10 of the power level, right?
Right.
I've seen the same.
He can't
in video
really do
games
the things anymore because now
Yeah.
he's a good guy. Yeah, I hate that.
Yeah, I've noticed that in video games as well. Like you fight some character and like it's like a really difficult boss battle, and you bring them into the fold, and they just like their stats are crap, and everything is just
right.
It's just bad. I'm thinking of Dragon Age as one example.
Yeah.
Let's see. So I mean, season 3 was kind of like doomed to fail. It was also moved on to another network. So people, I mean, times were hard in the 90s, right? You couldn't just Google search shows. So if let's say like it's a show you like that's being bought and sold, it's moved on to a TV channel that you don't have. It's not always so easy to like, okay, what happened with that, right? Unless you're like a diehard fan who just have to have your fix of Gargoyles or something, then again you just kind of concluded that, okay, the show is over and nothing happened. I remember having that attitude towards stuff in the 90s. It's like, okay, whatever was on TV and you just watch that. And
yeah, sometimes it just disappeared from the face of the earth.
It just disappeared and you didn't mind. I mean, it was totally fine.
Yeah.
But now it's different now. Like nothing disappears. These fandoms are always created online and they just keep going on in perpetuity.
Yeah, and if the show cancels, they'll just circle jerk and write fan fiction or something. Right?
Yes. And they have done that with Gargoyles as well. I mean, believe you me, they have a standard cult. Now, to be honest, I've not looked into it. I'm not brave enough to look at it. But they did.
I get
also
it. The Rule 34 stuff is one thing, but we draw the line at fan fiction.
But of course, I think that, there's like less Rule 34 stuff than I expected with this, and I think there's actually more fan fiction because the people who are fans of this show are like they have a slightly higher IQ or like better creative aptitude than I think, let's say, like Naruto fans or
makes sense, yeah.
Something else. Like they're actually interested in mythology and complex storytelling and so on. Yeah, so that's going on. There's been comics, I think, that were sold to Marvel that were actually canonical continuations of the story because Greg Weisman, he's basically said that he doesn't consider season 3 canon except for the first episode because it is so confused. So it's continued in other mediums, but I mean the fandom is like slowly it's slowly dying off. I don't know what's going to happen to this property in the future, if this is something that they're going to try to recreate. And to be honest, I hope not. I hope that this is never recreated because like with the sort of Netflix climate and the all this like sewage that's being created right now, they could never make this better. Like they could never make this good.
This is a perfect type of show for them to sort of bring back and be like, hey guys, remember Gargoyles remake, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think you could sell it or integrate it into some other property. Like, I mean, Disney has been really big on. I mean, it could be like a desperate attempt to revitalize Marvel, right? If they introduce Gargoyles into like the MCU for the maybe She-Hulk is going to have like cameos of Goliath or something. I don't know. But I like it as it is. Like I said, I think it's a perfect kind of time capsule into the 90s and to a vision of progressivism that was something different than what we have now.
Yeah, Speedrunner, the monkey paw has reacted to us now.
God damn it, the algorithm has read it. The activity has happened. They're gonna get your money.
Yep.
They'll make you watch it, or they'll make you hate watch it. That's
how it works,
maybe
right?
that's what's gonna happen. It's like She-Hulk or like these other He-Man.
I've been very it's been very easy for me to keep away from She-Hulk and Rings of Power and the new Game of Thrones and everything. It's just gone on so long that I literally just don't have any interest in it anymore. I'd rather just watch like old Seinfeld episodes than actually engage with that stuff, because I feel like it's literally sap. I made the preserving energy video, and I can literally feel it. I can feel it sapping away my energy by just talking about it.
But there are people they've not gone as far down the rabbit hole as we have, like, and they seem to be perpetually stuck in this kind of like anti-woke, or some people are kind of stuck in the 90s where they talk about, I just want I just want better stories, or I just want ethics in journalism, or ethics in games journalism. Like
it was always about ethics in games journalism. Yeah. You say as they're facing the wall as you load the firearm.
But I see it because I look at, I go on Facebook and I see Facebook ads for She-Hulk, where they have this kind of like, sorry incels, the show is not for you. And then you have people actually arguing sincerely in the comment sections, and these threads go on for thousands and thousands of comments, and there's so many uploads.
The Marvel, and it's like, oh my god,
oh, it sucks. I'm canceling my Disney Plus subscription. Whoa, oh, this is the last time. The last time. What do you mean the last time? They've been doing this for like 15 years now. They've just been, pouring sewage into your brain, and like, oh, now you're like, oh, you're noticing now. It's like, well, like the normie is hopeless, right? The normie is not going to be saved.
The normie needs to be directed, unfortunately.
Yes, they do.
So there's no disagreement. If you made it far enough to watch this stream, I don't think that's any new information.
Absolutely not. I think that's like every episode we end with normies must be redirected. Focus on redacted. But I think that's a nice note to round off on. I don't really have any more content, and we went on for like 2.5 hours now. So I think
there was more here than I anticipated, actually, once we got into it. I'm definitely going to have to watch season 2 now, just for the hell of it. I know someone at some point mentioned, let me see if I can find the comment here. I think I favorited it, but it might have been removed. Someone at some point asked if we were ever going to do here it is. A Dark Souls stream would be cool. And you'll know this, Luddic Path, but I have in like my secret back chamber, if I'm ever sort of out of video ideas forever, or I'm dropping in subscribers, my sort of golden gun idea is to make the Dark Souls is inherently reactionary video because of the lore. But maybe we'll do a stream instead.
We can certainly do a stream. Let's see, I played Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, and Demon Souls. I did not get to play Bloodborne. And it's very unlikely that I will. I mean, being a parent saps a lot of my time, honestly. So I mean, it's enough prepping these.
But I know enough about the lore to be able to do a Dark Souls stream. That's
so. Fine. Are we going to do like item descriptions, or that's what's going to be the?
That's the way it works, isn't it?
It's the we're just going to go through slides of helmets and axes and stuff, and try to speculate on the lore. That's what I've seen with these channels. Right? I don't remember their names specifically, but they just
that's what it was for a long time. Yeah, and. What I would be if we were to do it would be to talk about the lore in general. I wouldn't be doing item descriptions. I would be talking about this is what happens and this is why it's based, pretty much. Nietzsche's Horse also got a plan to do a 40k stream. I would, but that is like a whole other. I'm not well versed enough in 40k. Like, I enjoy 40k. But just the sheer autism that brings out in the comment section if I talk about 40k, I can't be able to compete.
I think in this sphere, if there's anything,
watch Arch Warhammer or something.
If there's anything that there's enough of in like the DR, it's like History Buff and Warhammer 40k. I don't think you need us to do. I don't think we can
would
do it
love
justice,
to do
right?
it just for fun, right? But I don't feel like I would be able to bring anything to the table, which is like, okay, why
the same
would I
here.
do it anyway?
I can't. I can't say anything that Morgoth hasn't said. That there's a lot of big names in the DR that have done great stuff on Warhammer 40k. I don't think I can add anything. So
Nietzsche's Horse, you're exactly right. That would be my That would be my point. I would talk about the design, the lore, how the gameplay is compared to other video games, etc., and the politics of that. The politics of Dark Souls, I guess. Glow in the Dark for $2 says, "Get the whip, boys. We're hurting normies." Yes.
Well, I do think that works actually. I mean, I think we bring in a lot of people with these with these three types of streams, or like covering this content that's not typically covered by people in our spheres.
Well, I hope so. I mean, it was fun to dig into the show. Considering I hadn't watched any of it.
No,
It
I mean,
was
I've not
interesting.
been paying attention to the comments. I hope people have gotten something out of this, because it's a type of show that
I mean, for
it's
half the
not.
stream, they were
Yeah.
arguing about Nordic food, so I don't know.
But yeah, it is this type of thing where it's a show that has some elements that could be interesting for people in the dissident, right? But it's not something inherently deeply reactionary, right? And I think a lot of people will just fall off in terms of interest, and it's a little bit difficult to sell it in as something they're interested in if it's not like going
Sure.
100% in on the baseness.
You can learn from things even though they're not based, right?
Yes.
That's like there's always going to be someone out there who's more schizo than you are, but even though they are, it doesn't mean that they're more right than you. In the end, it's who's wielding the firearm and who's leaning against the wall, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, if people were watching this and I was getting a response, that we'll just do more of these. I'll try to do more of these shows, more of the
Sure.
sort of kids stuff in the future.
But maybe a 40K is something we can do in the future. But a food stream, a Nordic food stream, is certainly going to happen because there was a thing that happened a couple of days ago where Leo Borealis triggered a bunch of the Indian call centers by saying that Indian spices are a way of preserving the food. They didn't like that. And they especially didn't enjoy that he was from Scandinavia as well. But he's...
I don't understand. Like, why did they get triggered by it?
I think they misunderstood his point, to be honest, because I think he said that, they use the spices to either conceal or to prevent, which is scientifically based, that certain spices prevent the degeneration of food, because
I
when you don't
didn't
have...
understand why that was controversial to say. I thought that was just...
I don't know either.
Right.
That's just but apparently they took offense to that because he's a racist or something.
That's very bigoted in the call centers. I mean, did he talk to
I was joking that it's the call centers just because it's a bunch of Indians, but also a lot of trans flags, etc.
The Pajits in
the Pajits and the Ukraine flags came for Leo.
Oh, damn. Yeah, but they weren't in our spheres, right? I hope that wasn't...
No, those are just random normies
I see.
that he triggered, yeah.
Oh, well. Yeah, truth hurts, I guess. But I mean, I don't even see it as a bad thing. I just see it as kind of fact. Even when my approach to Indian food is that if the lower quality stuff they give me, the more authentic I think the experience is, right? When I go to an Indian restaurant.
Well, yeah,
because
that being said, it's not like I don't enjoy Indian food, right? But it's still a fact that using those spices preserves the food, and that's the reason it's spicy.
And it's spicy, and they're covering up like older food with spice, and that's kind of the point. That's the experience.
So you can say that with modern day technology, Indian food has evolved, right? But I mean, so has Norwegian cuisine, and that's why Norwegian and Swede and Danes win like every third international cooking competition, right?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that'll be the learning experience for me.
It's going to be fun. Show. Now, I don't think we have anything more for tonight, and it's getting late, and I want to attend Radical Liberation stream that starts in 10 minutes. I'll post the link in the description or in the chat here. You can go join that and say hello from me. He's going to be talking about Credit Suisse, I think, and how how everything is fine. By the way, I'm just calling to say everything is fine. There's money in the bank.
Things have never been better than they are now.
What's the Monty
Disclaimer.
Python? Ladies and gentlemen, there's absolutely no cause for alarm. So please go over there and show him some love. Do you have any memes coming this week, Luddic? Or
Well, I had to cut down on my meme production to prepare the presentation and just to finish the these ones. But of course, I'm going to prepare some stuff for King of the Hill next week. But I'll have some more time to do the memes. I've even gotten some requests from other people who wanted to like voice act. I mean, if that's something you want, you could just message me on Telegram actually. So I'll just like send some scripts to people, and I can just put links to your channels out there if you that's something you want. I mean, my channel is not huge, but I am pushing like 4,000 subs soon, and like at least 1,000 people will see it. And if you want some exposure or something, I can just send you something, and I'll put it together and record. I think that's going to be a fun sort of community thing.
Yeah,
but you can tune in next week. We're doing King of the Hill with King
of the Hill next week, and then we might be able to cobble together the food stream for then, and hopefully by the end of October we'll have Nordic History Part 2. So that's like a tentative schedule for you guys. All right, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week. Bye bye.